deep, has a man deep. It is caught for the touchdown. Corey Davis.
What do? Attacks leverage. If he's outside leverage, he doesn't want you to beat him outside. So stem towards him, hold him outside, stamp outside. Drive face, full cell vertical, get into the blind spot, and he absolutely burns it. Corner is lost. He literally has no idea where Wilson is.
Really high floor, really high ceiling. We could be talking about the best corner in the league. Sauce can do that.
This is actual film. This is actual football talk. It's a football show. We're supposed to talk football, not storylines.
And you are watching, hopefully listening to another edition of Blewett Blitz Live. I want to try to get this onto the podcast apps. But Kyle, it's been 2 weeks. Free agency started. There's been some things that have happened with the Jets, but not so much. But we still have plenty to talk about. We can talk for 2 hours easy. But with that being said, what's up, my man?
Hey, how you doing, sir? Yeah, it's weird. The Jets always make it interesting, and as if signing one of the all-time great quarterbacks wasn't interesting enough. Now they got this whole thing where they basically kind of agreed to trade him, but the trade terms have not been finalized yet. And I've never kind of seen a trade, not to my knowledge, drag out so long where basically it's just two sides and there's really not a third person, a third party, and it just drags out. I mean, the Jets always make it interesting, man. Yeah. So
I thought about saying it. I think like within the last couple of weeks, I just never really brought it up, but it's so true. Like we get the big time quarterback, and we're all excited about it. Slightly nervous because of the volatility, a little bit of volatility around the whole situation, but we have to wait a month. Like it's just, of course we have to wait. Now with that being said, before I even get into anything, because we kind of already got into it. One with that being, and with all that being said, sorry I was 3 minutes late because my Bluetooth connected to the Mets game and it screwed everything up. But nonetheless, is this getting done? I really don't want to talk about Rodgers for a while, but obviously you haven't really spoken about it in the last 2 weeks. Does it get done before the draft? Are we looking at an end in the next couple of weeks?
I think it absolutely has to. And, it doesn't take a genius to really figure this out because everybody and their mother's been saying it. It makes so much sense for both the Jets and the Packers to deal picks from this year's draft, especially if you're the Packers, because the Jets finished with a losing record, 7-10. They're picking, just outside of the top 10. And I know that you're not giving up the first round pick, but the 42nd overall pick, I mean, that's a premium pick right there. Mm-hmm. If Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets, which he is, if you trade him, the Jets are almost certainly going to be better than what they were last year. They're going to have better wins. So if you're the Packers, you want the picks now, you want to help Jordan Love, and you want better picks. So I don't see how it couldn't happen. It has to happen before the draft, right?
Yeah. I would think so too, just because like exactly. If you're going to try to surround Jordan Love and see what he is going forward, you want to surround him with premium assets this year. Now, obviously we can argue if a second round pick is a premium asset. We're assuming that's what the Jets will give this year. Is that enough to, change the fortune of a quarterback? Not necessarily, but you do want every single thing you could possibly get. And the Packers are smart enough to know that if they trade for a second this year, it's probably gonna be a lot earlier than if they trade for a second next year. Now, obviously that goes on in negotiations. Well, hey, your pick is a second's not a second, a 43 is different than a 60, for whatever we're hoping we are next year. So they'll have to probably throw in an extra fourth or fifth round pick, whatever it may be, to cover that ground. But nonetheless, I think it's going to happen within the next couple of weeks. There's some reports out there saying it's going to happen within, this week. And you can see the Packers through like the, whatever they call it, where all the coaches and GMs fly down to that one spot where I don't know where it is. But they all fly down to that spot and there's like owners meetings and all that stuff. And they all talk, and it seems like through the media, the Packers have been backpedaling a little bit. I don't know if you've seen the whole Twitter saga with Peter Kukowski, everybody's calling him now. But it's like a Locked On Packers host or something like that. And
I've seen so many people quote tweet him and just on the guy. Yeah,
he is. If they get like a second, even a 2 and a 2, he's backpedaling a lot of what he initially said, because there's Packers fans out there who are talking about a first round pick, Jermaine Johnson, Sauce Gardner. Like obviously those were the outlandish ones, but even some of the respected people were talking about 2 first, a first NJJ, a first, a second, like all this stuff. So now that, we're hearing, I don't know if it was their coach or I think it was their GM who was saying, we don't necessarily need a first round pick. And then you see Packers Twitter kind of backpedaling a little bit. So at the end of the day, before we say hello to the chat, and we can kind of just move off of Rodgers unless he comes up kind of organically in the conversation, Kyle, what do you feel like the final trade compensation is? Because But the next time you're on the stream, 2 more weeks from now, hopefully we're going to get that done. So what's your final prediction, hopefully, for what the compensation will be for Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, so there was some Charlie Robinson report that he thinks it's going to be one of the second-round picks this year, a second-round pick next year, and possibly Corey Davis, if I'm not mistaken. And the holdup is that the Jets want some kind of insurance return, whether or not Rodgers comes back next year. And when I heard that, I mean, that kind of sounds about right to me. I felt almost certainly when the Jets traded for, they traded Elijah Moore to the Browns, and they got back, the Browns second-round pick, which is an early second-round pick. That to me basically said, okay, it absolutely has to be a second-round pick this year. But what else is it? And I do feel like it's going to be, at least if not a second rounder next year, a third rounder next year. I feel quite confident in that. And it does seem like Corey Davis is going to be a part of the deal because, there's all these rumors about OBJ. It seems like the Jets are the leaders in the clubhouse to get him based on all the reports that we're seeing. Saleh and Joe Douglas are, meeting with him at these owner meetings or whatever. And who was it? It was LaFleur, who, if I'm not mistaken, at these meetings said, yeah, we need to add to the receiver room. So, what better than to add Corey Davis, nice veteran, solid player who you could get. And he's on a pretty cheap, reasonable contract for 1 year. So.
Yeah. So I want to talk about we're talking about the Moore trade. We'll talk about the Mecole Hardman signing, OBJ and Campbell and Ben Jones and all this stuff. And by the way, Kyle, I've been grinding the film a little bit this week, which people hate that term, but got all of Aaron Rodgers done. Lazard is done. Chuck Clark is like halfway done. So then really after that, to watch like Mecole Hardman and some backup offensive linemen until other stuff happens. So got some opinions on those guys too. So I don't know if you watch any of our new players or anything like that, but we could discuss that a little bit as well. But yeah, with the Rodgers thing, I thought initially it was going to be like when we really obviously locked in that we're going to trade from, my feeling was a second and a third or a fourth that was conditional, and it can move up a round or two based on playoffs and the Super Bowl or just playoffs. So I landed, I think last week, on a second, a fourth that can become a third with the playoffs, and then potentially second with the Super Bowl. So right now it seems like the Jets are going to give a little bit more than that, which I'm okay with. I think 2-2s for Rodgers is okay if it's a 2-year deal, but if they were to give up 2-2s for Rodgers and they didn't have that pick protection kind of in 2025. 2-2s for potentially 1 year is way too much. It's way too much. So I would be pretty pissed with that. But if it ends up being a 2 this year, 43, not 42, 43, a 2 next year. And then, okay, if he doesn't play, it's the Packers, pick, which you hope is going to be lower than yours. Now, obviously, depending on 2024 play, the Packers might actually be better than the Jets because we might be in a little bit of a hole post Aaron Rodgers era for the Jets, which if it lasts only a year or two could hurt us in the future. But nonetheless, yeah, so we'll see what happens with Rodgers. I'm getting done with waiting. I'm really done with even investing my time into it or my thoughts into it because it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Like thinking about Lamar Jackson and Matthew Stafford and running it into the summer and all this stuff. I have a strong feeling before the draft, especially with the Packers backpedaling a little bit. It's give it 3 weeks. I'm hoping it's today. I'm hoping it's right now because we should just never talk about it again. We'll get to the chat a little bit, Kyle, before we run through some of the topics. David, Scottish NY Jets and Rangers fan. Looks like the Devils and the Rangers might match up in the playoffs too, which would be quite interesting. I know I'm going to go to at least one games. Oh my God. Not in the first round. I don't know. They played in the second round in, was it 2011, 12, 13, somewhere right around there. Not the best of my hockey history and keeping up with that stuff, but yeah, somewhere right around there we played in the playoffs. And then the Devils won, and that's the year they played the Kings in the finals and lost. I think that was 2013. I could be wrong on the actual date. But Dave Scottish, I think we need offensive wides, need a center, a guard, and maybe a left tackle, defense, a safety, maybe another defensive lineman, and another edge rusher, just my opinion. You're going to get to that in a little bit. We're going to rank our needs, Kyle. But those are some positions that, thrown in that chat that are definitely going to be discussed. Eagle Fang, Packers fans on Twitter turning their back on A-Rod is mind-blowing. In my lifetime, if the Jets won a Super Bowl, they will never turn on that quarterback that won them a Super Bowl unless they were. I think
some Jets fans would certainly turn.
That's what I was about to say there. I think after 10 years, you haven't really done too much in the playoffs. And now if he was absent, if the Aaron Rodgers topic was absent of all the stuff he's doing in the media and Pat McAfee and calling out the Packers GM and all that stuff, then okay, I would agree with Eagle here. But if he did that to the Jets GM and we had a new hot shot quarterback in Jordan Love, who we wanted to like automatically pour our faith into, even though he doesn't necessarily deserve it, like you want to spin more towards airing with Love and what's his name, Gutenhurst or whatever. So you're like going to hate Rodgers more, like most people at least. So yeah, Jets fans would turn their back on him as well. There definitely be some, Kyle, if we were the Packers right now. I don't think their organization is like classless. I don't think the fans are classless at all or anything like that. They might be a little bit naive about their trade package they're going to receive. And yeah, a little bit spoiled. Like, I don't know if you've been on Twitter too much in terms of like around the Packers Twitter, Kyle, but they think they're just assuming Jordan Love is going to be an absolute stud. And I get it because they haven't seen bad quarterback play in 25, almost 30 years, whatever it's been. So even if he's just okay, it's going to be a big downgrade.
Like that one start he had against the Chiefs in 2021, they put up what 7 points? He didn't look very good in that start, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, no. So I watched him a little bit against who did he came in against? I forget what team it was last year, and he actually had some nice plays, but it was still one game.
He had a touchdown pass against the Eagles. Yeah,
Eagles. Yeah, he had some nice tight window throws in that game. But again, Kyle, we have seen quarterbacks have very good games. We have seen quarterbacks have very good months. We've seen quarterbacks have very good second half of years. 1 game, 2 games is not enough. It's just not enough.
There's also something too, like when, if you come in there, how many times have we seen throughout the years when, quarterback goes down in any game for whatever reason, and the backup comes in and he starts playing pretty damn good. And so many of the fans are like, why didn't we just start this guy from the beginning? Well, part of the reason he's doing good is because the defense didn't game plan for him. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's also one thing to consider with a game like that, but I don't know. I haven't watched enough of him. I don't think you or I watched really any of his college film to really, not in any serious way, to really have like a strong opinion on him, but I don't know. If you're a Packers fan, I don't see how you can absolutely be sold on him. But I get wanting to move on just because you have a chance to get some premium assets, and you really don't know how much longer you can hang on to Rodgers. And it doesn't look like the Packers are a real legit Super Bowl contender this year. So I get it.
I just noticed, Kyle, or I didn't notice. Did that scratch on my screen disappear?
I don't see it, so I guess so.
How'd that happen again? I don't know how that happens. I was like looking. I was like, where is it in my fan that well right now? Because I usually do it, and it's gone. It's a miracle.
Yeah, that's weird.
NJZ, I don't want, and only people who have been watching the show for a little bit, I guess we're going to get that reference, but I don't want to be a downer, but does anyone else wish we hadn't sold out for Rodgers? It's not me. I was comfortable with the comfortability of Carr and him being a solid quarterback for the next maybe 4 or 5 years for the Jets. But if you're legitimately trying to make a Super Bowl run, the better quarterback gets you the better chance. And I'm not saying I'm backpedaling on Carr not giving you a chance at all, but Rodgers gives you the better chance this next year or two. Winning the Super Bowl, Kyle, obviously we've never changed our opinion on that. Rodgers is the better player right now over Derek Carr. But the comfortability with Carr, again, for now in the future, obviously not as volatile of a situation necessarily. We could have just had him instead of doing all this stuff. But no, I don't. It's going to be very exciting with Rodgers, especially just watching. I don't know how many snaps, Kyle, how many snaps are in 2 years of film, but I watched every single one, and I'm excited. I'm excited for Rodgers for sure. So watching that film as compared to what I've watched in the last 10 years, 8 years, 7, 5, 6, whatever I've been watching film for.
There is no comparison.
No, not even close. We have a guy make a throw or two that Rodgers can make in a game, but they're littered throughout Rodgers' game. Like you'll see 20 amazing throws from Rodgers in a game, where Zach will have one of those every couple of weeks. So it was definitely exciting. But sneakers and boots, fellas, day by day, the Packers and their fans are learning we hold the cards. Both teams need each other. Like, I don't think any team is necessarily the front runner. I think the Jets obviously have like the benefit of patience, because they don't need to give up a pick this year. Obviously, they prefer to give up picks in the future and surround Rodgers with 2 2s this year. But at the end of the day, both people, both organizations want it to happen, right? Like, they have Rodgers, we need Rodgers, they need to get rid of Rodgers, and we're going to take him from them. So both teams kind of need each other, but we're gonna keep moving on because we've talked about that so much in the last 2 weeks about leverage and about all this shit. So I don't want to hit on it again. But Jealous Beanbag, yo, what's up? Joe's running late. Yes, I was, because the Mets game. Hello, sir. Captain K Techno from Tokyo. Kyle, do you remember? I know it was a couple weeks ago. I think he's from Tokyo.
I have
Pretty
no
sure.
idea. I don't
Pretty sure.
remember.
Walking the football beat before Joe walks the beat. I'm not sure. Oh, I get it. I don't walk a beat though. That would suck quite bad. Sneakers and boots. Packers can't be dumb enough to want draft picks for their quarterback twice. What does that mean? How? Packers can't be dumb enough to want draft picks for their quarterback twice.
Do not want.
Do not want picks.
Is he referring to Brett Favre, that trade from a while back?
I'm not sure. Might be. Hard to. We're not connecting there on Sneakers and Boots. Nick Allen, Andy Reid, not knowing who Jordan Love is. Okay, so let's get into some of the. Kyle, have you watched any film on the new signees of the Jets or the tradees of the Jets?
I watched a ton of Lazard, being that I've been watching a lot of Rodgers as well. Yeah, go ahead.
You know what? Let's get into before we get to the rest of the chat and say hello to everybody and go through some of their questions. Just because I can't bring up every single one, but with the receiver core, obviously, what are your thoughts on it? Like as it stands, bringing in, Mecole Hardman. Obviously, we haven't spoke since then, and it's up to $6.5 million. The base is 4 something or 5. I forget exactly what it is, but even $6.5 million for Mecole Hardman is not that bad. But overall, your thoughts on, let's say we do trade a Corey Davis, which we're assuming we did, right? You just said that you think he's in the package. So the receiver core right now is obviously Garrett Wilson, Mecole Hardman, and what am I blanking out now?
Garrett, Alan Lazard.
Yeah. Alan Lazard, sorry. So Alan Lazard. So what are your thoughts on those 3 as a group? Do we need to add more? Do we need to have Odell Beckham? Is there a possibility we can keep Corey Davis? We'll go through it a little bit more with a fine-tooth comb than that question I'll lump in there for you for one, Kyle. But overall, receiving core, where we kind of stand right now.
I would say there's well under a 5% chance that you have both Corey Davis and Odell Beckham Jr. on the same team. That I do not see that happening at all. You asked the question, do we need Odell Beckham? I don't think you need him. I don't see how you could need a guy who, when's the last time he eclipsed 1,000 yards? It's been several years now. And when you watch him, I was, for shits and giggles, being that, it seems like there's a decent chance the Jets will sign him. I was watching, not in a serious way, but I just flipped on his highlights from his Rams tape. And, you do see, like he was always a very crisp route runner. He was always a very handsy type of ball, catcher of the ball, goes to snatch balls out of the air. He still has some of that, but the Odell Beckham that we saw in 2015 that took a slant route, 67 yards for a touchdown at MetLife Stadium, that guy is gone. Like he does not.
No,
have
that was
2019.
That was 2019. You say 2015? It's 2019.
No, well, 2015 he did as well when he was with the Giants.
Oh yeah, then he did again with the Browns.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So I mean, and so that guy is gone. He don't expect any of that at all. So the whole $20 million thing, I don't think he's getting anywhere close to that. And even kind of dispelled that myth on Twitter. Yeah. He said I'm not asking for 20, but give me more than 4 was kind of what he said.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like I just can't. I don't think it makes a lot of sense because I just can't see the guy staying healthy all year. I hate to say it, but I don't really care too much about he's a cancer, as some people say. I don't really believe that. He's a prima donna. I don't really care much for that either. It seems like, honestly, there's so many players who really, really, really like him. I mean, just see the way that people Mekhi Becton talk about him and stuff. He's a very well-liked person. I don't think he would be bad for a locker room. But
you haven't really heard much about him being like a diva with the Browns or with the Rams. Minus the whole, and it kind of dissipated, later in his career. But then it came back a little bit with the whole airplane incident, which is obviously a little bit of a turnoff for some fans, seeing how he acted on the airplane. But nonetheless,
remind me what happened with that. I forgot what happened.
There's a video he refused to get off, and everybody else had to deboard or deboard the plane and then get onto another one or whatever the case was. But he was he's basically like telling people oh well, you're sitting here waiting or whatever. I'm gonna be on a private jet in an hour, talking shit to him, kind of about how rich he is and stuff. So gotcha. Not ideal. I don't want my players acting like that, but it doesn't seem like he's a bad guy in the locker room. But nonetheless, with OBJ, I said on Twitter today, if he makes any more than Corey Davis, keep Corey Davis. That's where I am. I really think that he probably deserves a contract, $7-8 million with some incentives. But if it's anything close to the $15 million that we heard today, I'm not willing to pay that for OBJ. And in terms of the injuries, he's had 2 ACL injuries to the same knee. Right. It's been a year and a half. So you're hoping with time that stuff heals. ACLs aren't what they used to be, but still, it's a big risk. Now, if you're getting OBJ that we saw in the playoffs for the Rams, I still think he could be a solid 2. I don't think he's a number 1 anymore. He's not the OBJ taking the slant to the house or anything like that. But if you're talking about in our receiving core with the Jets, do they really have a 2 right now? No, I don't think Lazard is a legit good number 2. I'm sorry. I think he's okay in a starting lineup.
I completely agree with that.
But if you're gonna mix him with OBJ with Mecole Hardman, okay, I'm cool with it. Now, if he wants more than the Kyle, I don't know if you feel that's fair, like the $8 million ish contract with some incentives to go up to 10 or 11 with games played and catches, all that stuff. OBJ is a good fit in the offense. Like he can still get some yak, he can still catch balls deep because of how he can catch balls outside of his frame, et cetera. So I don't think he'd be a bad fit with the offense. It's the health thing, and it's the money. But 7-8 million. Some incentives, I'm okay with it. If you start getting up to 12, 13, 14, $15 million for Beckham, I just don't think there's any really, it's not worth the roster gymnastics you're going to have to do with that contract for Odell. But at that point, how much better is he than Davis? Like realistically, I think if he's healthy, he is a better player than Davis. But Davis also, while being injured, in the last couple of years, missing multiple games a year, he has still been on the field the last year. Like Odell Beckham hasn't seen a football field in a year and a half by the time he plays his first game again. So what are your thoughts on, I guess OBJ, the contract he deserves, and then at what point are you just willing to keep Corey Davis? Because at the end of the day, it's not a great receiving core in my opinion, but it's pretty deep, Kyle. If you have a Garrett Wilson, Davis, Mecole Hardman, and Lazard, nothing to write home about minus the 1, but the 2, 3, 4 are all pretty solid. So I'll be okay with that. I think it's enough to get it done with Rodgers, a good running game and a very good defense. But again, OBJ offers a little bit of that ceiling that Corey Davis doesn't necessarily have. I think he could still be more explosive than Davis. Yeah.
I mean, we've seen plenty. I mean, there's obviously been throughout the years. I mean, if you think about the old Colts teams, they always had 2 really good receivers. It's nice to have like 2 really, really, really good receivers. But at the end of the day, there's so much 11 personnel with teams nowadays. You're constantly having 3 wide receivers on the field, and there is so much that you want to keep your guys fresh and stuff. So you're moving guys in and out. It's nice to have solid depth. I like the idea of having solid depth, but if you have a guy like, OBJ, who's not been healthy, he's not been on the football field, that kind of like dispels the whole depth idea thing. I do like what you said about having really like a really incentive laden contract. I just don't know if he wants to take that, but I don't really know what else is on the table for him to really take. So, and I also wonder too, and my question for you was, how much of the Jets' interest and pursuit is because of what Rodgers said? Now, on the one hand, I think like if you're Rodgers, you got to be somewhat realistic. Okay, the Jets already did make a big splash and sign one of your guys.
I really think it's like 99%, dude.
Exactly.
Like I honestly, if he didn't express that interest, did they get rid of Elijah Moore? They try to ride it out with him and see how good he is with Rodgers. Because at this point, it's not that you can't find a better replacement in the future for one of these guys, but if we don't get Odell Beckham, Kyle, and let's say Corey Davis is in the trade, who else is out there right now? Because if we go into the draft and it's Mecole Hardman, Garrett Wilson and Lazard, that's not enough. That's not enough. It's just not. So you have to be better draft receiver in the first 2 rounds.
There's a little bit of the Jets fan base are saying, well, how good can Denzel Mims be, with Rodgers now throwing the ball? Don't rely on him at all. Sad to say, because we both liked him a lot.
We've seen some stuff with OBJ too. Like the Sauce put up, I don't know if you saw today, it was like 3 fingers with the football in the middle of it. Like I did, kind of saying like OBJ's catch. And dude, he's been tweeting with the Jets for a while now. I would be pretty shocked if OBJ isn't with the Jets. It seems like all signs are pointing to it. And it would be again really, really surprising if he wasn't. But again, if you go into the draft with just those 3 guys, I would be pretty disappointed. Again, at that point, keep Davis. You keep Davis up to that point because what is he worth to the Packers, Kyle? Like at the end of the day, what? A 5th round pick, maybe
no higher than that.
Yeah. So I'd rather keep him and then not have to force a receiver. Now, let's say, the Jets have Skoronski and Paris Jones. They would take at, or Paris Johnson at 13. They're both gone. Okay. Then we pivot to JSN and you get rid of Davis. But let's say the draft works out. They get Skoronski at 13. Nobody falls to the 2nd round. Then guess what? You keep Davis, but you can't just get rid of him and not have a replacement. And Odell is that replacement to me. So yeah, we see them obviously. There's the report today that maybe he's waiting for Rodgers, which I understand. Take your time, see if a higher offer comes in, and if it doesn't, and Rodgers signs, then you sign with the Jets. Now, with that, Mecole Hardman signing, you really get into him as a player. Obviously, you said that he shouldn't be necessarily a starter, but what are your thoughts on him as a player and what he offers to what he offers in terms of what he is as a player, and then specifically like to this offense?
Every time I think of this player, I think of a conversation that I can't remember if we had it over a stream or it was a conversation that you and I had in person. But I
completely forget what you're about to say right now.
I asked you your thoughts on Mecole Hardman, and you were just like, Jag. that was exactly how you responded. And I pretty much have to agree. It's funny. They asked at these owner, whatever meetings that they're called, they asked Robert Saleh what he brings to an offense. And he's like, gas. And the dude is fast as hell. Like, he has the ability to pull away from people. Like, there are players who might be really quick, but they can get caught. Like, they can't take it like 40, 50, 60 yards to the house. This guy, if he can get a little bit of separation, he actually has the ability to pull away from defenders. Yeah. But I don't think he's got great ball skills. I don't think he's a great route runner. He is kind of like, according to him on Twitter, he's much more than a gadget guy and stuff, but I kind of see him as one of these guys who, on end arounds and things like that, that's where he really comes in handy. If you remember when we went to Kansas City back during Adam Gase's second year, the dreaded 2020 season that ended in failure because we didn't get the first overall pick, they ran one of those forward pass jet sweeps, and they were around like the 50-yard line, and Mecole Hardman took it to the house against us. Yeah. So there is something to like there with the player, and you certainly like the number that he got. I mean, it's like $6.5 million, but it's like 4.5 base or whatever. But I think like the rest is like, was it like a bonus or something? I don't know. These contracts, man, it's hard to understand how they work sometimes. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely not a 2, not a legit 2 or whatever. But like as a piece in your receiving core, I think you have to like it, right? If he's like your 3rd or 4th option, so.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. In terms of a Jag, is he a Jag as a starter? Is he a Jag as a 4? If he's a 4, I'm okay with him as a 4 for sure. Now, if he's a 3, I'm not so happy, but he's almost like a souped up version of like Braxton Berrios, Robbie Anderson hybrid. So he's an offer kind of, I think he's going to be a gadget guy. He's going to see some reps in the offense, but he's going to be a gadget guy. He's going to be a punt returner. If we don't find a different punt returner, maybe an emergency punt returner. And then he offers the just vertical explosiveness for the offense. Like, even if he's not a great route runner, Kyle, defenses are going to game plan for, okay, Mecole Hardman is running vertical routes. And then also east and west, and hopefully the Jets build upon this where they didn't build upon it last year. But if you send them on a fake end around, a fake jet sweep, some motions, actually throw it to him once in a while to make it a threat. I hope they do that with him as well. So yeah,
by the way, if we can just envision that for a moment, like one thing you watch Aaron Rodgers tape, I don't know if this has been something that like he's really done a ton throughout his career, but like when you ever watch him on these design wide receiver screens where he's just it's not always RPOs, but sometimes when they run RPOs and they're just getting the receiver the ball on the boundary, like the dude doesn't even set his feet. Like he has the ability to just
snap throw.
Yeah. It's just snap, pop, throw. And it's so quick. And the beautiful thing about it, and the reason why he does it, is the quicker he can get that ball out of his hands, the quicker he gets it to the receiver. And it's just that little split second where it takes the defense to react and close. So like, if you're talking about a guy like Hardman, who, he's not the most physical guy in the world. He has a little bit of trouble of like, getting defenders off of him. But if you give him a little bit of a crease, like there was sometimes, like I was watching his game against the Broncos at the end of the 2021 season, and he had a big catch that was like it was like a little wide receiver screen. It was like a tunnel screen, and he took it a good 40, 50 yards, something like that. It's like if you just give him a little bit of wiggle room, he can take it like a big distance. So, I think like when you envision someone like Rodgers, I bet you they're going to do a lot of little design plays like that to try to get him the ball. And because Rodgers can just, get it to him real quick, if you just give him that little bit of a crease, you could see some big plays. So I don't know. I'm just trying to envision things in my head.
No, and that's what I love about the fit in the offense, because they need that gadget guy. Again, he scares defenses east and west and north and south, vertically. And like you said with Rodgers, and it's something I put in his strengths, which writing it down, I realize how stupid it sounds to people, but I know how much people like you'd appreciate it. Rodgers hits the flats so consistently. Like, it's ridiculous, his consistency to the flats. And that's not, and it's an underratedly hard throw that people don't think about, but a flat throw is hard. consistently at least. And he does it. There's a lot more that he does. Listen, I'm not gonna be like, oh, I'm excited. You know why I'm really excited for Rodgers in 2023, Kyle? Throws to the flats, but it's a big part. It's a big part of the offense. And those Packers offenses, it seemed like it was either a really quick screen or a quick check down or vertical screen. Like that's all the offense was, like barely intermediate. So it was kind of fun to watch.
And you had a tweet that like his receivers really didn't help him this past year. And it's like, dude, there was a bunch of like drop balls on deep balls or like, I'm
not buying stock in Romeo Dobbs next year. That's what I'm not doing.
Definitely not in Romeo Dobbs. Sammy Watkins is totally washed.
Terrible.
And Lazard has some like there's some when they run slot fades with Lazard, he'll surprise you every now and then with a big catch, but then he also has like a bunch of dumb drops and he doesn't pull away from people at all.
If Jets fans hate Corey Davis's hands, they're gonna hate Lazard's more. I'm just telling you right now.
They're worse. They're definitely worse.
They're worse. They're definitely worse. And like so I like Lazard, Kyle, but this is not one of the ones I'm like, oh yeah, he's definitely worth $11 million. Like I'm okay with it because he's with Rodgers, but if that was just a signing without Rodgers, I'd be like,
If we could just talk about him for a moment, what do you think of his blocking? I saw you, tweet out at least one clip of him laying somebody out on a block. It was like, it was some play where, they ran some type of like a screen and he bypassed this one defender to hit this other guy who totally didn't see him coming. And he laid the shit out of him. But I really don't think he's a good blocker overall, even though that's kind of the way that he was sold. I don't feel like he drives his feet on contact. He is tall, so he has trouble getting low sometimes, but I feel like he's like willing to throw his body in front of people, but his technique is just really not good. He definitely doesn't move people. He doesn't really stay on blocks. Like, when you run a stalk block, part of it is just, maintaining, your feet, staying in front of the guy. And, sometimes people just bully him. I don't know.
Yeah, he gets bit. He, for lack of a better term, he gets bitched at times. That's for sure. People,
so he's not the blocker Corey Davis is. He's not the blocker Denzel Mims is, if we're being honest.
People talk about him like he's a really, really good blocker. And I think the one clip went around, and you know how it is on Jets Twitter. If you get one clip and spread around that's what he is. And it was, there's a clip. I forget exactly what the play is, sweep or whatever it is. He's a crack block on a linebacker or a DB and he cracks them. And then two other guys fall down. I think it's like Dolphins players.
Yeah, that was the Dolphins game. And then he counts them afterwards. Yeah.
He's not as physical as Corey Davis. He's not as good with his technique as Corey Davis. He's a decent blocker, and or we can even say solid, reach for solid a little bit, because a lot of blocking with receivers is just willingness, to be completely honest, and he's willing. But if you think he's going to be laying guys out and drive blocking them and all this stuff, it's not there. Corey Davis is definitely a better blocker, and I would say Mims at his best is a better blocker. Mims has a lot of inconsistencies as a blocker, but I'm not going to act like Lazard's aren't there either. But with Lazard, there's a question I was thinking about with or just bringing up. I think he's going to be in the slot more than people realize he is. I don't think he's going to be primarily in the slot. I think if they do get Odell Beckham, I'm going to assume it's going to happen. If they get Odell, he will be more in the slot. And obviously the Jets are going to run so many, bunches and stuff close to the line of scrimmage where, the slot and the outside is not going to matter as much with this offense as some other offenses. But I think he's going to be inside some more than people think with Mecole Hardman running vertical, because he's not a great separator on the outside. In any instance, whether it be a dig or a slant or whatever, his release package is pretty basic. So I don't want him as a primary outside receiver unless he's going, vertically. So in the slot, I think he'd be somewhat, better. But with that being said, again, Odell is going to primarily do it, but I could see Lazard playing in the slot a little bit more than people realize, because he's not the best route runner. Again, his explosion is not there. His hands are not there. Now, does he have a nice ability to catch fade balls and some verticals outside of his frame and all that stuff? Sure, even though with what I saw, I would like to see him attack the ball more in the air at times. He kind of lets it come to him. Yeah. So Lazard he's decent. He's okay. I'm not trying to hype him up, but what are your thoughts about him on the inside a little bit more than some people think with Mecole Hardman on the outside, or even maybe, Odell at times?
Yeah, they ran a good amount of double slants too, sometimes with him as the slot guy. Being that he's pretty big, he has the ability to, kind of get inside a defender. You do want a guy who has got pretty good hands. I've seen him drop a decent amount of slant balls as well. But, I feel like, and one of the better routes that he does run to, and you kind of just said this before, is slot fade. I think if I'm not mistaken, his touchdown against the Jets was on a slot fade. He's had a couple other good ones this past year. So, I do think that he'll be on the inside a little bit more.
I think he's okay. So slot fade, some verticals. He's much better on his routes intermediately and deep if there's no press. If there's press, he struggles just because guys aren't really threatened to open up versus Lazard. So they're able to stay super patient and kind of cut his route off at the stem of it. But he's good. He's good on crossers. He's good vertically. Whether not like a crosser, maybe not like a dig, but like just a straight up crosser versus some zone. Like he's good at stemming them and some things like that. But he's okay. Again, as a 2, I wouldn't love him. Like if you're telling me healthy Corey Davis versus Lazard, I'm taking Corey Davis every day of the week. Now, with that being said, hopefully he's not just the number 2, because I hope the number 2 role is split between Odell and Lazard. 2A, 2B. Okay, we can get that done, especially if you're considering Garrett Wilson is going to hopefully blossom into a superstar following his superstar rookie campaign. So that and Tyler Conklin, et cetera. So, we'll see. And now with all that being said, Kyle, kind of wrapping it up, your thoughts overall on the Moore trade? I think you're going to kind of say, the front office didn't like the trade that had happened. They're not going to sign him to an extension. He quit on the field. I know that's going to come up because you brought that up before really anybody kind of trashing Moore in terms of his snap to snap effort. So thoughts on the Moore trade and the return they got from him, which obviously ends up being, depending on whatever trade chart value thing you trust, about a early 3rd round pick we got in return for him. Obviously trading, Elijah Moore third for a second, right? So
I think overall you have to look at it as kind of like a failure, but kind of maybe something that you almost needed to do if you want to make things work out. I mean, if you just hung on to him, like I feel like Moore is kind of one of these. He could be one of these streaky players. Like if his mind's right, he could be really, really, really good. And if he's got an all-time great throwing him the ball, he feels appreciated. He doesn't half-ass his routes anymore. But if you're Joe Douglas and you start to think about guys who you want to give a second contract to, it's like, do I want a guy who is going to give me half-ass effort because the quarterback who's throwing him the ball is not the best in the world, right? Like I only have Aaron Rodgers for 2-ish years, if that. We don't have a plan yet who's going to be the successor to Rodgers here. And around that same time, I got to be considering, whether or not I'm going to give Elijah Moore a long-term deal. And, it's just kind of like, it wasn't just this season. It was something that you saw Ole Miss tape a little bit. And you even saw rookie year a little bit. Like he does take plays off. You want to talk about blocking? Doesn't give you anything in the blocking department. Now, he did request a trade last year. Part of it was he hated Mike LaFleur, who's no longer here. It's really disappointing because we were just saying 2 weeks ago when we were having a stream, like who benefits the most from Rodgers, and if I'm not mistaken, we were kind of like saying Elijah Moore. Because I definitely think he could have been 1,000-yard-ish receiver with Aaron Rodgers tossing him the rock. But I guess it almost needed to happen. Because I think if you're the Jets, you realize you have to give up an early 2nd round pick this year. You just have to. But the Packers aren't going to trade Rodgers to you if they're not getting a 2nd round pick this year. So I think you kind of needed to make the move in order to make the Rodgers trade. And I think when you combine all those things together, I won't say it needed to be done, but from Joe Douglas's perspective, it needed to be done. But it's a tough one to swallow if you're a Jets fans, because you and I both like this tape so much to the point that, we got Elijah Moore jerseys, right? I got an Elijah Moore jersey and an Elijah Moore shirt. Sucks. But, it's
a failure for like what we thought. Like watching his film at Ole Miss, I thought he was going to be a very good player. I still think he could be a good player who's getting 1,000+ yards a year. I really do think he's that good. But it didn't work here. Obviously, being too much of a vertical threat, not being a primary read with a quarterback who can only get through 1 or 2 reads is not necessarily ideal for any receiver, really. And you can make the argument like that. Okay, well, you're signing Odell for a year or 2. Can't you just keep Elijah Moore, who's making $1 million or $2 the next 2 years? Either way, Odell's not going to be here past 2 years. Is Elijah Moore going to be here past 2 years? Either no, but either way, it doesn't really matter. So I'm a little bit. Not upset with the trade because I get it because he requested it and they didn't necessarily love him. But if you could have made it work, I would have loved to see it make it work because I think he's a good player. And again, pennies on the dollar. You're paying him what? Let's say $1.5 million for this year, next year, Kyle. Where Odell is going to be $8-9 million, and he might not be even as good of a player as Elijah Moore right now. I think if Elijah Moore hits the ceiling, he's better than Odell this year. Now, can Odell outproduce him? Yeah, obviously depending on the situations, etc. But yeah, it does hurt a little bit. Now for a early third, value, getting 2 second-round picks, I do think one of those second-round picks is going to go to the Green Bay trade for Aaron Rodgers, and now you have another second-round pick to hopefully address whatever it's going to be at that pick. Obviously they value that second-round pick, so they want to get another one.
Trading Elijah Moore away increases the likelihood of drafting Jackson Smith-Njigba by what percent?
That is such a hard.
I know.
That's so hard because is it Odell? If it's not Odell.
But even so, though, like Odell is like, okay, if it's Odell,
I think Odell's almost a lock, though. That's the problem.
Okay, if it's Odell who's a lock, you're probably trading Corey Davis away too. So
they're not going to go that deep with the receiver core. You're not going to have Mecole Hardman 6.5 at 5. So if Odell, it's not happening without Odell. Obviously now there's like I haven't looked at a lot of mock drafts and stuff, but very very high. They draft the receiver at 13. And is it Njigba? Maybe. I have to watch all the receivers and tell you exactly who I like.
Well, you like him a lot.
All these guys.
Because we did watch him a good amount when we watched Garrett's tape.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, I watched him too with Justin Fields when he was a freshman.
Yes, exactly.
So I watched him with Justin Fields, and every time I watch him, like, dude, this guy's gonna be really like. I remember bringing up like, dude, Njigba's good, bro. Like, good. I don't know what he did last year, but assuming he got better or stayed at the same level, I wouldn't mind it at 13 if we didn't go to Odell. But to me, I'd rather get Odell, even though I like Njigba, because you can address tackle there, and if it's not tackle exactly at 13, maybe you trade down a little bit, but I'm not confident going into the season with, let's say it's Dwayne Brown, Max Mitchell, Mekhi Becton, and let's say even if they don't draft one in the first round, it's a second round pick. I don't love that situation. So I'd rather address receiver in free agency where you still can, and then draft a tackle unless they're going to sign like a Cam Fleming, who I know Nani has done some work on and said would be at least like a decent option if they don't get one in the draft. But I'd rather address more needs prior to the draft because I don't see the tackle out there right now who's necessarily worth starting, if you kind of get what I'm saying there.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I would just hate to force a tackle pick there if there's not really a guy who's worth it. You were just telling me that, you've watched a couple of Broderick Jones games and he's extremely raw. A lot of people are saying Skronsky could be a guard because he's got short arms. I'm not touching Broderick Jones at 13. He's just too raw. At the point where let's say it's let's say like you're saying, like, okay, they don't love Skronsky or he's not there because of the short arms. They don't think Broderick Jones is worth it. Paris goes earlier. Do you trade down at that point? That's probably what they would look to do. But we know this, Kyle. You have to have 2 to tango. So if nobody wants to trade up at that point, the quarterbacks are gone, whatever it may be. It'd be interesting to see who the pick would be. But I think right now it's between tackle, receiver. I think are possibilities in the first and second round. I think a center. I think they really, it seems like they've done a lot of work on centers. I still think they bring in a Ben Jones or something like that, which we'll talk about. But I still think they want the backup option, or not a backup option. If they sign Ben Jones, I think they draft a center relatively early to develop him and have him as depth for this season. And then also I think an option is defensive tackle because we'll talk about that in a little bit. But hopefully again we address some of these holes. But were you saying something? I interrupted it, or do you have something more? No, my point was just I just really wanted to emphasize I hate forcing the tackle pick if you really aren't sold at the guy who's there, and I don't think Joe Douglas would do that. No. Legitimately several years ago when we took Mekhi Becton, there was several good potential options there. I haven't watched these guys yet. I'm hoping to dive into that like really soon, as in like this weekend and, this whole upcoming week and stuff, to really, kind of get a sense of how I feel about those guys. But, I just think like, the Dolphins a couple of years ago, when they had like 2-3 first round picks, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but they drafted an offensive tackle out of USC, and it just,
Austin Jackson. Yeah. And a lot of people kind of viewed that as a reach at the time. And he was just so bad, and they tried moving him to guard, and it didn't really work out as him as a guard there. Yeah. So I felt like it was kind of just like one of those forced picks where Miami was struggling on the offensive line, and, you view the upside of drafting a guy there, and it's like, I want to draft a guy who I know is going to be a good football player. And I'm pretty sure, based on everything we saw from watching Justin Fields and then watching Garrett Wilson's tape last year, that someone like JSN is going to be a legit player in the NFL. So yeah, I don't care about his 40 time. Like he's really, really good route runner. I don't. Yeah. Like I'm not saying this as a direct comparison because I haven't watched enough of both to necessarily compare them. But Keenan Allen's plenty slow, and he's still a very, very good receiver. I'm not comparing him against
DeAndre Hopkins 4.57.
Well, yeah, different body type. Yeah, but yeah,
different body type. I'm just saying, like, the 40 times matter. We were just hyping Mecole Hardman's, he's a 4.33 guy, and we were using that to praise him. Let's not say it doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But, to be
if it
really,
matches it on the field, unless you run like a 4.3 like Mims did, and Mims does not play at 4.3 speed. I'm sorry.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely something very legit to say, like, you will see Jackson Smith-Njigba, like, he creates tons of separation. He's a really good receiver. He's good with the ball in his hands, but he will get caught if he, if he's running 30, 40 yards downfield, the defensive back can't catch him. It's just the truth of it, but no, that doesn't mean that he's not extremely valuable. Do you want to get to, we got at least 2 super chats.
Yeah. I want to do 2 more follow-up ones kind of before we get to that, and we'll get to the rest of the chat because we don't have a ton of stuff, but, with that, so kind of the situation I laid out there. Let's say they do sign Odell. Obviously, they get rid of Corey Davis. Broderick Jones, they don't like him. Scroncy, they feel like he's a guard. Paris, is it? I always forget if it's Johnson or it's Johnson.
I think it's Johnson.
It's Johnson Jr. And I watched this film and everything. I already have a whole review prep for him. I always forget if it's Johnson or Jones. But Paris is gone. Scroncy, no, they don't like him. Jones is gone. No, they don't like him. And Odell is signed. What are you doing if you're the Jets? Obviously, a lot more has to happen before the draft. But as of right now, if that situation kind of unfolds where there's no trade back, the tackles, there's no tackle you like, you already have Odell. Brian Branch is a box safety or like a slot guy. He's not really a true, he's not a true like free safety. So the Jets are kind of shit out of luck in that situation. It almost seems.
Yeah, I don't know who the other receiving options are there.
There's Jordan, but let's say we got Odell, so you don't need a guy.
You could maybe go with the trade back and accumulate picks, but I don't know.
No trade backs available. Nobody's calling you, Kyle. Phone's dry. That you already have Odell. You don't want to draft a number 1 pick to be your 3rd or 4th receiver this year. So
I'll tell you what, you're not going to do what the Green Bay Packers did and draft a quarterback there. You're not. Somebody was saying, what if the Jets? What if Will Levis slips and you draft him? You're not doing that.
No.
I don't know, man. So
D tackle? I don't know what's going on there.
Well, shit. I don't know about the off the field stuff, but if Jalen Carter's there, this is something we've said for many weeks now. His tape is really, really, really good.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to, and obviously that's a need for the Jets. There's no doubt that defensive tackle is a need for the Jets. Yeah. We'll
get to that in the future though. We'll stay away from that for now for time's sake.
So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. We're really going to get more into the draft film a lot. Because it's interesting, like free agents and off-season stuff we usually address a lot earlier, but we kind of waited until the Rodgers news was more kind of cemented before we started watching his film.
Like I'm already so late into the process with getting into the NFL draft stuff. I think like I said, I'm already halfway through Clark. I'm going to finish Clark with the next couple of days. I think I'm going to get 4 weeks.
Is it 4 weeks as of today that it's draft night?
Yeah.
Okay, 4 weeks.
Yeah, I just don't have enough time. Like I'm already halfway through Clark. I'm gonna get Mecole Hardman done, get the backup offensive lineman, and wait for more signings and see what happens in the draft and do it from that point. Pretty much. So now with that, before we get into the super chat, unless you have anything else to say, and add that after if you do. People kind of bring up Lazard and Davis as like similar guys. What are your thoughts on those guys like as players? They're like their differences and kind of how they compare. And I want to follow that up with just the overall, like your feelings with the overall build, like the actual build of the receiver core.
Yeah, so Corey Davis is obviously no burner or anything like that, but I think he's kind of one of these guys who, especially, you didn't really get to see too much of it with the Jets because A, the injuries, and B, the shitty quarterback play. But if you look at a lot of his Tennessee tape, he's kind of like one of these, dig route, hard cut, crosser type route, catch with hands, pretty good in the open field. We saw it like week 1 in Carolina, his first year here, where he took a dig route and then, turned it upfield for probably about 20 something yards after the catch. I remember you were going to get a hot dog or something at the time and you missed that play, Joe.
I miss a couple plays when I'm drinking. It just happens. Listen, I'm not telling the whole story because I'm not going to tell the whole story to a lot of people, but I didn't know the butt fumble happened until the next day. I got a little, I turned on the highlights after. I was like, whoa, that happened. I remember like one Sean Green run. I was like 19 years old and I got obliterated at the Thanksgiving game. So
what's funny is, I also missed that. And dude, I was watching that game at my in-laws house. And this is even before I was married at the time. I was engaged at the time. And my father-in-law, he's Egyptian. He doesn't know anything about American football. He doesn't care. And he turned the TV. Mm-hmm. He changed the channel. This was during, a Thanksgiving meal. Football isn't a tradition that he really knows or cares about. Yeah. So I didn't see it either at the time. And I wasn't going to change the channel back. So yeah, I had to see it the next day too. And then I'm seeing all the highlights and everybody dunking on the Jets and you guys signed Tebow. I remember when they did like NFL Network did like top 10 worst teams of all time. Like they do these like top 10 lists. And this is back when I used to watch NFL Network a lot. I know we're getting a little off topic, but I think people find these things funny sometimes. Mm-hmm. They had the 2012 Jets as one of the top 10 worst teams of all time. I mean, like, listen, they were bad. They were really bad, but they did win 6 games. Don't give me that shit.
They were better than the 2020 Jets, right? It was a 2020 the year we went?
Definitely.
Okay, yeah, that's obviously a little bit of a reach, but
I'm saying they did this list like several years before the 2020 Jets, but still, I mean, like, I'm sure you could think like, I don't even know if the 1-in-15 Jets, the year that they drafted Keyshawn Johnson afterwards, I don't even know if they were on that list. So like, it's funny, like, but anyway,
Lazard, Corey Davis,
Corey Davis, Lazard, I feel like the differences in terms of skill set and stuff, like what does he really do well? I feel like in terms of contested catches, he's okay. Like you also pointed out that, he kind of lets the ball come to him a little bit, but he does have,
there's a couple PIs he could have drawn and the thing with Rodgers, and we have a lot, like even Rodgers we can do for a while about like what happened in 2022, which to me is a lot of his like lack of trust of the offense. His offensive line was bad last year. Receivers were bad. Lack of trust there, and he was off some more games than he was, but he typically was. But he also had a thumb injury. But nonetheless, with all that being said, are we getting to Lazard? Is that what you're talking about?
So we're just talking about Lazard a little bit. So
I forgot my point, but continue. I'm an idiot.
One thing you almost never saw with Corey Davis, it popped up so little on his Titans tape, was him catching vertical downfield balls, especially ones of a contested catch nature, over the shoulder type thing downfield. Whereas Lazard brings some of that to your game, where he can catch the ball over the shoulder and, kind of rise up and get it. Like he's not like I guess he's got a pretty good vertical jump and stuff, but he can go up and get balls. Corey Davis is not that type of player at all. So they are.
Really agree.
Yeah. I don't think I really have too much to add to that.
I think Corey Davis is the better. I think he's more explosive. Like Corey Davis is not a burner or anything like that, but he's definitely more athletic than Lazard. Lazard is better vertically. He's better with like catching outside of his frame vertically. Corey Davis to me is a better blocker, better over the middle. I'm taking Corey Davis on a crosser route all day over Lazard, even though Lazard I think is good in that region too. But Corey Davis is actually a very good intermediate like crosser route runner. He's pretty damn good at that. But the thing with Lazard and Rodgers, there are some times in Rodgers' film I want to see him go back shoulder more than he does, where he likes to lead guys vertically and let receivers make plays. Like there's times he'll hang up balls and let the receiver like cross the face of the defender or just straight up jump up for it. In instances where I wish that he would throw it to like a back shoulder. And there are some times where he chucked it up to Lazard and it might be a little bit short at times, which is going to be when you're throwing the ball 55 yards down the field. And Lazard lets the ball come to him instead of attacking it. And if he attacked it, there's at least 3 or 4 PIs he could have drew last year just because he lets it come to him, deflection comes, whatever. But if he's worked back to the ball, PIs all over the place. So I want to see him do that more. But yeah, overall, more vertical. Corey Davis offers a little bit more athleticism, yak, things like that. But they're not the same player. And overall, I do like the build of the Jets core. You have Lazard, who is your fade guy, crosser type guy, vertical guy. You have Mecole Hardman, who is your east-west guy, yak, screens, all that stuff, and just a burner in general. I think Wilson's all-around guy. I would like to see his vertical ability taking more advantage of this year with his hands and catching the ball outside of his frame. And if you get Odell, I think he's kind of a jack of all trades too, right? Like, so you have 2 jack of all trades with Wilson and with OBJ, and then obviously Mecole Hardman and Lazard kind of fill their roles as well. So I really do like the build overall as with the receiving core, assuming we get a Odell Beckham.
And that he's actually healthy. And I do wonder, do the Jets doctors get to look at his knee and stuff? Because from what I was hearing from like very, plugged in
signs pending physicals, like people will get traded and then fail their physical. So I'm sure they'll have to do a physical.
Yeah. So, okay. So then if I'm the Jets, you have to be pretty confident that the knee looks pretty good, because there was some really serious reports that when he was with the Browns, when his knee got injured, that the surgery was performed very poorly. And that's what led to the tear when he was with the Rams, and there was serious complications that like, his knee could like be like, serious, like really, really, really long-term
Oh,
damage.
I didn't hear that. Well, if that's the case,
I was, but
they're
that's
keeping Corey Davis, my guy.
I think that's why some people. Well, I think that's part of the reason he didn't play at all last year. Like teams were like really, really, really scared. So I don't understand all of a sudden like the infatuation to the point where like you're hearing some of these contract numbers. Like I get if you want to take a risk on him, but like there's no way that you could possibly plug in a lot of money to him.
If it's as serious as you're saying, if it's a real like risk where the Jets aren't confident, okay, he's gonna be pretty healthy. Corey Davis is going to be healthy enough, miss a game or two here, just keep Corey Davis at that point if his knee's really that much of a concern.
Well, yeah, I mean, like obviously it was operated on post, but it seemed like from the reports I heard, it was really, really, really serious. And to me, that's like when going back to the whole JSN thing, like if he's clearly above, like, again, early first round, you got to go talent versus need, even though tackle is obviously the much bigger need for the Jets. But for me, it's like there is a part of me that's a little excited for the potential of Odell, but there's no way that just because I sign him, I'm going to pass on someone like JSN, just because I got Odell now. I don't like that idea personally, but anyway.
Yeah, that'd be a hard spot for Douglas. Like if he's there, there's no tackles there, but you have Odell because then again, Mecole Hardman, $6.5 million.
It's a 1-year deal.
Yeah, but so I get that, and that's where we can get into a discussion about okay, future team building versus what is best for the Jets this year. Like obviously we want to draft BPA, but in a year where we really need certain positions to maybe push us over the top and make the Super Bowl, do you draft wide receiver 3 or 4 with the 13th pick if you have Odell, or you take the risk? Now, again, if his knee is as bad as you're saying is, and the Jets evaluate it like, hey, this is really, really risky, guys. He's not going to make the whole year. Then just Corey Davis is a part of that group until obviously the draft happens. And if it is JSN, okay, cool, it's JSN, get rid of Corey Davis. If it's in the second round and he shows some, and if you really like him, okay, then get rid of Corey Davis. But that knee being evaluated is a big part of that, because if it's bad, obviously.
I have a question for you and for the entire chat, for that matter.
Which we're going to get into the chat in a second, by the way.
So last year's draft, I think the past couple ones actually, the NFL's changing and for the better, and I guess like making it more exciting. There were so many draft day trades last year, and part of my thinking is like, it obviously makes sense to draft the young guy as attack. Like, is there any potential trades for offensive linemen that we could see on draft night? Right. Because obviously the Jets have huge needs. And I really don't know this. I'm just kind of throwing stuff against the wall. Like the Jets really need to do some work with their offensive line. Yeah. Now I was thinking like before Laramie Tunsil just signed this big mega deal that he just signed, I was thinking that he could be a potential trade target for the Jets. But that's obviously not happening now. They want to have someone to protect their young quarterback, whoever they end up drafting. But is there anybody else who could potentially get traded? Because, did we see, AJ Brown, we kind of envisioned that he could be a draft day trade, but like, was it Hollywood Brown was also last year, right? That wasn't 2 years ago. I know that kind of caught everyone by surprise. I don't think people were really seeing that one coming. So could there be like a big offensive line trade during draft night? I don't know.
I think it's possible. Like if you go, let's say you don't sign Odell Beckham, you're like, shit, like we kind of want a tackle and receiver to like fit this, to fill this offense. And there's a guy available for, a 4th round pick or something like that. A 4th doesn't sound like a lot, but you can get some expiring contract guys who are veterans on bad teams for, a 4th. Didn't somebody really good just go for Jalen Ramsey just went for like a 4th round pick, right? Like it can happen.
It was a 3rd round.
3rd round pick. So it could happen. Now, who is it? I don't know. The only rumors I've heard about were like Bakhtiari coming, which he's been injured a lot. And just watching him last year, even in his 11 games, he did not look very good to me. So I've heard him. I've heard Jonah Williams, who's been pretty bad with the Bengals. So I don't have a name, but let's say it does come to fruition. Even if it's a big time guy, 2nd round pick. Like if you can solidify the tackle position with a 2nd round pick, your 1st pick goes to a receiver. Okay, that's a way to fix the offense. Like nothing's going to be chalk and exactly like what
you don't have much
happen. So.
You don't have much interest in moving AVT to tackle, do you? I know Michael has more interest than I certainly do. No, because I heard that Shaq Mason's again available for trade, and he's still like a
didn't Douglas say something recently, or Salas say something recently about him staying at right guard? There was some inkling of information indicating that they're talking just guard for AVT. Now I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was out there in the last maybe
good.
week or two.
I like that. I don't know. I didn't personally hear that, but I like that thinking. I do not want to move him to tackle, but just trying to get in the minds of them and wondering, okay, do they see him as a potential tackle? And then you can go and get someone like Shaq Mason and plug him in at right guard, because I think he's still a fine player there. But yeah, I'm glad that they intend to keep him there. All right, let's get to that super chat.
Go ahead.
AP_14 for $5. Sorry that this is so delayed. I've been wanting to get to it for a while, but just kind of.
I haven't allowed him. I've been messaging him behind the scenes saying, "Kyle, you better fucking not do that super chat right now." But
he says highly unlikely we don't get a good 2 years from Rodgers. Is he really going to change teams and cities to play 1 year? Maybe if we win the Super Bowl this year. So my basic thoughts on that is I think I try to put myself in the shoes of a player, and it's kind of hard because I was never, ever not even a shred of a percentage of that level of talent. But I feel like if I wanted to make the move, I would want to give the new fan base who just traded huge assets for me, I would want to give them my all. And I feel like that would have to be more than 1 year. And it still looks like the tape that you saw last year. I know he made some dumb mistakes and stuff. There are some dumb decisions on his tape last year that you really didn't see earlier in his career. Yeah. But I feel like it wasn't that he was fooled by defenses. I felt like he was overly confident in his arm and that he was pressing a little bit at times because he had a bunch of jags to throw to
with Rodgers.
Yeah.
And there was, and I actually wrote it down. I forgot, but there was at least a couple of plays where, again, I think I think at times he didn't trust his receivers. I think at times he didn't trust his offense. There was less anticipation throws with these receivers. There's obviously ton of drops, all that stuff. But and there was a time or two, he had that pick where Lazard stopped running. I don't know if you remember that one, up the left sideline. That was just odd, which I'll bring up.
Maybe what game that is in.
That's mush right now. That all meshes together, kind of what game. And you know that obviously. But you had that. You had the one in the Lions game that was off the helmet of one of the defensive linemen. You had one by the defensive line, which was Aiden Hutchinson. On it was a trick play,
almost a tackle throwback. Yeah,
where he underthrew, which he should have threw it over. There's a pick he had versus the Eagles where it was a good PD by the DB and it popped 1,000 feet into the air and got picked off. Yeah. There was one that was a clear. I don't know if you remember this one from Lazard too. He's running. I don't know if it's a vertical or crossing route, but the DB clearly comes up behind him and shoves him in the back, and Lazard goes like this, and then the DB picks the ball off. I'm like, how is that not a fucking DPI? And there's another bad one that I forget, but he had 12
He
picks.
Two really bad ones against the Lions in Detroit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that were to Kirby Joseph. The one I thought he could have fitted in there, and there was one really bad throw against the Dolphins where he it was up the right sideline to Lazard, and one of the DBs, maybe it was Jones, maybe it was Maxwell, whoever, but they're very heavy inside leverage of the receiver, and just looking back to Rodgers as Lazard streaks up the sideline, and Rodgers could have maybe fit outside shoulder, but he underthrew the hell out of the ball, and maybe that was his thumb, and he almost got picked off there, but it wasn't an interception. So there were some bad plays, but to me, Rodgers still looked pretty damn good in 2022. Again, his offensive line was bad, Kyle. Even in 2021, it was pretty bad. The receivers did not help him at all. And I think, again, the lack of trust. And there was a time or two where his eyes dropped to the rush. He didn't trust the guy, didn't put an anticipation throw. But you put what Rodgers was in 2022 on the Jets this year with upgrade at everything pretty much. I think you're going to get a much better Rodgers. And I obviously assume that he was a little bit more off. If Rodgers is off at all with his throwing, it's typically inside to me. I want to see balls vertically, more outside sometimes. There's some balls over the middle where I think he could throw it with more precise accuracy, throwing it out in front of guys, where he puts it on their body a little bit more, giving DBs chance to make a play on the ball. And I think that got a little bit more, I guess that the frequency of those bad throws increased more when his son got injured, but I don't think he was terrible. I really don't. And I know maybe I'm a little bit biased because he's about to be your quarterback, or hopefully, but his 2022 was less discouraging than I thought it would be prior to entering the film watching of that season.
Yeah, it definitely was not discouraging at all. There were some head scratching decisions, but like I said at the beginning of this tangent that we went off on, albeit a good one, is that I think it was kind of a matter of him pressing and trying to do too much. And hey, listen, sometimes when you try to make chicken salad out of chicken shit, if you got a bunch of listen, Christian Watson, he's a very raw rookie. Romeo Dabbs, 4th-round rookie, playing major reps. Sammy Watkins, super washed. Lazard, hey, listen, fine player, but a jag. I mean, those are the guys you're throwing to.
He's a very just okay starting receiver. He's okay.
You're going to have to press a little bit, but there were some questionable decisions. And like you said, too, a lot of those interceptions, too, were just kind of like freak accidents. But there were a couple, it's like, okay, Aaron, that was a bad decision. But it's like, when you press in NFL, windows close so quick, you do have to, throw with anticipation and stuff. And sometimes, just bad things happen. But the talent is definitely still there, man. Like, this guy can sling it very few QBs can sling it the way that he can.
I think I put up a 65-yard throw on Twitter the one day, and actually I put up on the show too, and he wasn't even stepping into it. He threw the ball 65 yards. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, it's very ridiculous, and how quick he gets that ball out, his release is insane. So
the platforms he can throw from, but AP, yeah, I agree. I would say, yeah, I agree in terms of it being, if he wins Super Bowl this year, he has a higher likelihood of not returning in 2024, and he's very conscious of how he looks in the media. So if this year's a disappointment, I think he would have a stronger chance of coming back. But I really don't know between 1 and 2 years. Like, let's just say a very basic year. They make hopefully division or conference championship, whatever it may be. Do you have a feeling like is it a chance better as of right now that he returns and plays 2 years, or is it just 1? Like, do you have a stronger inkling on this at this very moment what it's going to be? Because I'm truly like 50-50. I don't know if it's going to be a year or 2 years.
I would say I'm probably a little bit less than 50. I feel like,
in terms of which way?
Unfortunately, 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah, just, I don't know. I guess based off some of his comments, and then also like, what's the guaranteed money that he's getting for next year? Like, there's obviously a huge incentive for him to play this year. So like when he was saying, oh, I was 90% retiring, it's like, yeah, Rodgers, I kind of don't buy that. It's like, I like you overall, and I think the media treats you kind of shitty and stuff, but I think you're kind of lying a little bit right there, and it's fine. Like, it's not like a huge lie or anything like that, but it's like you had $59 million fully guaranteed to you as long as you played this year. So I don't kind of buy that you were retiring, but it's like, well, how much guaranteed money is tied to him coming in the following year? So, he has a huge incentive to play this year. What's the huge incentive to play the following year? And it's like, oh, well, does he feel like he owes the New York Jets fan base something? He doesn't know a shit. So, I don't know. So I feel like it's maybe slightly less than 50%, but I don't know.
I know I think there's another super chat or two if you want to hit those before I start getting into the.
It's a AP again. JSN at 13 is tempting. LOL. Yes.
Again, it all depends. It all depends on the situation. I really do think they land Beckham, for better or for worse. Again, it's a risky move, but I still think it ends up happening. There's just so much signs pointing to it. Like, there's a lot of smoke with this one.
By the way, when joining, do players going to those meetings where it's all the GMs and owners and head coaches, do players ever show up there? Like, I thought that was a little strange that Odell Beckham was there.
No, there's been there's players who show up there sometimes.
Okay.
At least I don't think there's a ton of them, but I've seen at least in the past people you've heard of like players walking around and whatever there.
Okay.
But yeah,
I think that's it in terms of super chats.
Okay, perfect. So let's go, and I appreciate both the super chats, AP, but let's keep going into the chats. And while I do that, Kyle, I guess I'll just kind of throw you a question. Defensive tackle position. Actually, I can't really just throw it to you because I want to look at a free agency tracker. Let's just go to D tackles, I guess. Fuck it. I already kind of did it. D tackles, Calais Campbell seemed like he was, obviously he was coming to visit the Jets, and he had the Jaguars, which you worry about because he's, he was there for a while with them, and then he went to the Ravens. Does he go back? And then you had the Bills, etc. But he's going to visit with the Jets. I believe it was today, and yesterday he signed with the Falcons. Yeah, apparently because about some charity work and whatever.
Yeah, right.
But what are your thoughts on the defensive tackle position overall right now and where we stand? I guess because for me, it's a position that we have to go into the draft or pre-draft. We have to address that position. You cannot go into the draft absolutely needing a D tackle, especially considering, and I think the Jets will think the same way, with how much they value the defensive tackle position, the defensive line. Like they try to sign Cox, they try to sign Campbell. I just don't see the Jets going to the first round or the second round and be like, oh, well, we hope our guy is there. So
Campbell, which Campbell are you referring to? I'm sorry, I'm not picking.
Calais Campbell, who got
Calais Campbell.
Yeah. So he signed away. Cox signed away. So do you think it's necessary before the draft? And is there anybody else
It's
out there that you like right now? Because it seems like there's a decent amount of names.
It's absolutely necessary, but when we saw that Calais Campbell was indeed a legitimate option, I was quite excited about that because I think that guy can still play, and I think he's very versatile. That even at this stage of his career where he's almost 40 years old, you could still kick him out as a 5 technique. Even shade him over a tight end, and you're not worried about him. You slide him all up and down the D line. It must have been just. He says charity work and stuff, but it's probably just the Falcons were giving him more guaranteed money. And as a guy who's trying to cash in maybe his final paycheck, I think that's probably the only reason why he chose. Has he won a Super Bowl? I don't believe so. No. He's been on good teams. He's been in AFC Championship games. I know he went to AFC Championship game with the Jaguars. Some players, it's more about the money than chasing the ring at the end of their career. They absolutely need to address somebody. We pulled up a list 2 weeks ago when the three of us were on, including Michael Nania, and we were not really blown away by a lot of those names that are currently available.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get a stud, but I think they can get based just obviously the defensive tackle interest from Jets fans has drummed up in the last couple of weeks because we legitimately need one, especially since Rankin signed away. We kind of assumed that might happen, but there are some names out there that people have done some work on. I know that Jets X Factor has done some work on. I've seen floated around who are still solid options. Shelby Harris seems like a decent option for the Jets right now. Al Woods, while older, is still apparently pretty solid with Seattle, based on people digging into his stats and some of his film.
Had a good game against us last year.
Yeah, Chris Wormley, the guy I've noticed from a couple of times from the Steelers. I didn't realize he was 29. I was like, okay, maybe that's another name people bring up. Who's the dude from the Panthers? I think it's a white dude, like Matt Ioannidis or whatever the hell his name is. That's another one out there. So
he used to play for the Commanders, Redskins a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And then he went to the Panthers. And he had a pretty good year last year. So there's some names out there. There's him. There's Wormley. There's Woods. There's Shelby Harris. There's another guy. I think it's Poona Ford from the Seahawks who had a down year, but in past years prior he was pretty good. So I think the Jets aren't going to fill that hole with some stud. Calais Campbell was a stud to me. I think Cox in some people's minds, maybe he's probably a little bit overrated at this point in his career, but is still a stud level player. I don't think they're going to get a stud left, but I see them being able to fill that hole with a starter. I think they're going to do so. Now, maybe they invest a little bit more into the backups than they wanted to because they want a really solid rotation of guys, which they do in general anyway. But yeah, I think there's starters out there left. I think there's 3 or 4 guys out there who I'd still like to see them sign, and they absolutely need to before the draft. And then I think in the first couple of rounds, depending on what they do at receiver, tackle, etc., I think D tackle is one of the, even with one sign, let's say it's Shelby Harris, I still think a D tackle is going to get drafted in the first 4 rounds for the Jets.
I don't really remember noticing Shelby Harris last year when we played. He was on the Seahawks last year, right? Not mistaken.
Yeah. He's in the Wilson package.
Yeah, so I don't remember him sticking out to me, but I remember when I watched, not a lot, but some Broncos games in previous years. Jets usually play the Broncos just because they're an AFC team and they usually finish in similar division rankings or whatever. But I remember being quite impressed by his Broncos tape. Now it's interesting, sometimes players you don't really know when they decline or whatever. I don't know if he took a big decline last year, but he's a player that a couple of years ago I was pretty damn impressed with. So I wouldn't mind,
and 31 isn't so old in D tackle age.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind potentially kicking the tires on him, but they absolutely need to address that before the draft and probably even invest a draft pick in interior defensive line at some point. If consider, you don't want to force the pick, but if a guy's there, because they want to run heavy rotation on the D line, we know they do. So
what are your top? I guess what are your top 3 needs right now for the Jets? I know you're going to say one, and I want you to kind of say when you say that position how much we're going or how we're going to fill that. But right now it's you're going to say D tackle. What are the other 1 or 2?
Center, obviously, right?
And you would say, and honestly, offensive tackle. I would probably say offensive tackle just because it's a more important position than receiver. But I think offensive tackle and receiver are right there at 3-4 at this point. So with center being said, Kyle, what do you do with that? Is it kind of the same thing? Where defensive tackle, again, you have Al Woods, you have Harris, you have Wormley, you have the Ioannidis, whatever. Some people, Poona Ford, whatever. So I think there's a couple of options out there. But right now, unless you're one of those guys, Kyle, which I'm not going to the draft and saying, oh, well, I'm just going to find some guy in the second round. He's going to start for Aaron Rodgers. That's fine. I'm more in the camp of bringing a guy, develop him for this year and have good, versatile backup offensive linemen, in the second or third round, whatever it may be. But right now the market is Ben Jones, who the Jets have rumored interest in or they've spoken to, and Connor McGovern. So is it absolutely, to me, it's absolutely 1,000% necessary that you sign one of McGovern or Ben Jones preferably, because he's been with the Titans, offensive line, the offensive line coach, he's not the Jets coach. He's been better over recent years. Now he has a concussion, so you have to look into that. But assuming he's healthy, Ben Jones over McGovern for a year or two. But either one is good enough, but you cannot not get either one. That would be really bad before the draft, in my opinion.
I definitely think the Jets will end up with either one of those guys. It almost makes you wonder if they currently have offers out for both of those guys, and that's why neither of those guys have signed yet, because they're still gauging interest from other teams. But it's kind of almost like, one of those deals where if one of the guys you are pursuing, but he doesn't like your number, he goes and signs elsewhere, then almost immediately you sign the other guy. I think a situation like that can play out, but yeah, I would expect probably one of those guys would be with the Jets, and I'm kind of fine with either. I know that, I know Michael said that he kind of was okay with moving on from McGovern, and I get it. I think you're even fine with that as well. And there is a part of me that is interested in, seeing what Ben Jones can do as opposed to McGovern, but I really appreciate what McGovern did for the Jets. When you compare him to what we previously had, and by and large, he was pretty healthy. I know he missed a couple games at the end of one season. I think it was a knee injury, if I'm not mistaken. But he was pretty solid, but he doesn't really necessarily bring nasty to the team. He's definitely not a bully out there. And last year, in terms of communication stuff and passing off stunts and stuff in pass pro, there was some concerns, but he's solid. He's definitely not a bad player. He's kind of like, well, at least in his tenure with the Jets, I would say he was kind of like mid-ish at this point in his career. Now that he's like on the wrong side of 30, is he like low 20s in terms of starting centers? I'm not quite sure, but I think he's still kind of solid. Ben Jones is old, but you also got to look into potentially drafting one as well. So yeah, either one of those guys. Sorry if that's a very long-winded answer.
No.
You want to get to a super chat we just got?
Yeah, but before that, I just think that going into the draft, by that time, Ben Jones and McGovern would have signed. And if you go into the draft absolutely needing a center, it'd be a really shitty situation. But yeah, so let's say, and before we get to the super chat, so we're saying, okay, they bring in, let's say it's Ben Jones, and seemingly with the center market, it's not going to be too high, $7-8 million for a year or two, maybe. They bring in, let's say it's Shelby Harris. Okay, so they bring in Ben Jones, Shelby Harris, Odell Beckham, right? Those moves are all rumored to make. And I know some of this sounds like it's a lot because of the Jets cap space. So if they're going for it this year, they're going to find ways to make it work again. Whitehead, Lawson, restructuring contracts, whatever it may be. So I think those three moves are ones they should make before the draft. And at that point, you enter the draft with big needs at, tackle, safety, linebacker, backup quarterback. But you look at the safety market, like there's some guys out there like Rodney McLeod, who was a decent starter with the Colts the last couple of years. You have John Johnson out there. You have Amos out there, who I know had a bad year with the Packers last year, but prior to that, he was a pretty solid player. So that hole could be filled for $3, $4, $5 million. Like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's got paid $9 million. Like you could, it's affordable out there at safety. So at the end of the day, that's what I want them to do. I think again, Jones, one of the vets D tackles. We'll talk about the draft, at a later date. OBJ, draft a tackle in the first or second round. Sign a Rodney McLeod, a John Johnson, whoever it may be. And then with how linebackers are getting paid right now too, Kyle, like what is Quan going to cost you? $3 million? Bobby Wagner's got paid like 8 or 9, Quincy got paid 6. And it seems like based on other contracts, it's overpaying, like based on the fact that, again, Wagner got 8 or 9. You have Eric Kendricks, who got 7.5. So can you get Quan back for $3 million? And then you're filling for just Jordan Whitehead's price of $7.5 million. If you cut him, you're getting Quan and a safety for that price. Like get rid of him. And then same thing for Shelby Harris. How much is he going to cost? So you can fix the defense for $15 million right now, and you can get rid of that off your books with just one move, with getting rid of Lawson. And I get people love Lawson, but Kyle, if I'm telling you, hey, it's Lawson, and I think this is legitimate. I don't think I'm being too conservative with the cost of these guys or whatever, but Lawson cost you Shelby Harris, Quan Alexander, and let's say Rodney McLeod. Which one would you rather have on the Jets in 2023?
You're saying I can get Rodney McLeod, Shelby Harris, and what was the other name? Quan for the price of Lawson. I mean, dude, I don't even think it would still probably be less all those guys would probably be less, I would assume, than 15.
But-
Because if Lawson's about 15 mil, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like and I don't think Quan's not going to get 5. He's going to get 3. You're probably looking at Shelby Harris around 5 or 6. I maybe even 7. But what is Roddy McLeod making at this point in his career? 2, 3. So to me, fill those holes, and then because the difference between JJ, Huff, and Clemens isn't as drastic as the difference between
But I know
Shelby
that
Harris
idea.
and Tanzel Smart.
The idea seems kind of nice, but I don't think that's happening though. Didn't they ask?
I'm
Robert
saying what
Saleh?
yeah, but okay, is it a trade or whatever? I'm just saying if I were the GM for a day, and obviously there have to be a lot that goes into that, but to me, that's better roster building than stacking up the D line while you have Tony Adams right now or Will Parks at free safety. Who was the third linebacker in a base set right now, Kyle? Sherwood? Who's
Better
the
not
tackle
be.
right now? So our starting tackles right now are Quinton Williams and Solomon Thomas.
By the way, you asked me a question probably 20-ish minutes ago about what are we going to do at 13 if this guy's there, not there, this guy's not there, and this guy's not there. We didn't really talk too much about potential pass rush options because I think that there legitimately could be a consideration at 13 because we know Robert Saleh wants pass rushers. So I don't care that you drafted JJ last year. I don't care that Carl Lawson is still on the team. I don't think that that's if they like a guy at 13 who happens to be there. I don't think that would stop them from picking him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know much about them. Some people are saying Nolan Smith is a one trick pony and such.
He's a 3-4. He's a 3-4 end, dude. He's not. There's no way he's playing the end for the Jets.
Okay.
I just don't
who's
think
this
so,
guy
but,
from? Who's the highest? Who's the guy from A&M? What's his name?
I'm not for the draft. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Dude, I'm telling you,
I'm
for the draft
gonna
this year,
start
I know
watching.
nothing.
I will start watching some of those guys too. Some of the edge rushers before our next stream in 2 weeks.
I know some tackles. I know a safety or two. I know some receivers, and that's it, Kyle. I haven't looked in the defensive line, but let's say that does happen where, hey, Lawson's gone. We know the Jets want Lawson to be on the team, but if you get rid of him because, you're trying to save money and get all these guys I just talked about, could they then draft the guy in the first round? I don't think it's crazy to say that. Would I bet on it? No, but I think it could happen. Now, last thing before we get into all the chats, and we're going to fly through the chats because it's the last kind of roster. We talked about D-tackle and center and all this stuff. Is backup quarterback a necessity to you in 2023?
For me, it is. I do not want to see Zach Wilson taking the field. I don't think he's ready. I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say that Zach Wilson is a bust. I cannot see him changing things around. I mean, he could. I'm not saying it's impossible. I would not bet any money on it. I mean, dude, every time somebody else came in a game last year, they were head and shoulders above better than him. I know that his win-loss record was better than other Jets quarterbacks last year, but that doesn't really mean all that much when you consider the nature of those games. So, you take some of the pressure off Zach Wilson. He gets to sit and, learn a little bit from Aaron Rodgers, a whole nother offseason of work. Could he get better? Sure. I don't want him as my backup. So I would prioritize it, but I know that sometimes there's coach speak, how much of it's being truthful. Robert Saleh could say, oh yeah, Zach's our number 2, but then he can also just say like, well, yeah, that was our thinking at the time, but then we really liked what we saw with this guy or whatever. I would definitely want another backup quarterback. I don't think it's drafting somebody. I don't see how you could justify drafting anybody.
There's no way.
And even if you took a late rounder, like a 7th round pick at a quarterback, I wouldn't anticipate that guy would be your backup. He shouldn't be your backup. He shouldn't be the backup over the second overall pick from a couple of years ago. So who's it going to be? That is the question. To me, the Jets actually do it.
If you're a team like, let's say, even if we got like Carr, but we weren't necessarily ready for to make a playoff push, okay, then Zach Wilson's your backup. That's fine. But when you're going for it all, and obviously, if I've heard the argument like, oh, well, if Aaron Rodgers goes down, we're fucked anyway. But we're assuming it's not a season-ending injury and it's a game or two. Like, let's say we need a win week 18 to clinch the 1 seed or whatever, and Aaron Rodgers goes out at halftime and it's a 17-17 game, and Zach Wilson trots out for that. Like, we don't want that. So to me, whether it be a Hoyer or a Chase Daniel or the dream, if he's coming for a fair price, like a Teddy Bridgewater type of player. But to me, it's necessary too. Zach Wilson cannot be the backup in any type of situation where we need to win a football game, which is terrible to say. I'd rather have Chase Daniel take a rep right now than Zach Wilson. That's how far we've come, but it's where we're at the end of the day.
I've been a big fan of Teddy Bridgewater throughout the years. I really don't have interest in him at this point in time. It seems like he gets injured way too often now at this point in his career, and it just seems like the past several stops he's been in, whether it's Miami, Denver, Carolina, he's disappointed in all those stops.
But Kyle, have you looked? So I get that, but have you looked at the free agency list of quarterbacks?
No.
Okay. So do you want me to look up the list of free agency quarterbacks and tell me who you want over Teddy Bridgewater?
It'd probably be slim pickings if anything, and it's probably Teddy, I guess.
So Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady. I'm just reading off a list of free agents. Wentz, Ryan, Bridgewater, Mason Rudolph, Joe Flacco, Blaine Gabbert, Chase Daniel, Trevor Siemian, Brian Hoyer, Brandon Allen, Josh Johnson, Nathan Peterman, Jeff Driscoll, Brett Ripien.
And Matt Ryan did look pretty cooked last year, but he sounds like almost like a more intriguing option than Teddy Bridgewater, to be honest.
Depends on the price, but yeah,
the Colts team was bad last year. It was bad. Matt Ryan has never really had a great arm. So he's never a guy who's really won with like making amazing throws or whatever. He's always kind of a guy who's won with anticipation. He always hangs tough in the pocket and stuff. I feel like Matt Ryan could be a decent backup if he wanted to play, but I don't know what the money would have to be like.
Exactly. If Bridgewater's going to cost you 3 and he's going to 4 and he's going to cost you 7, like bingo Bridgewater, but not much of there's not a great list of quarterbacks there, Kyle, but they need to do something. So next half an hour, we're going to fly through the chat. So Rob Broadhead, appreciate the $20 super chat, or not $20, 20 euros. I think A-Rod plays 2 years min. I think having Hackett, Rob, and JD will bring his load back for the game. It must have been toxic in Green Bay since they drafted Love. Not great environment to be in. Yeah, I could see that. Like I could see him coming to the Jets and be like, okay, new fresh environment, better weapons around me. Clearly he gets along with, the GM, or he wouldn't be coming here. Maybe he doesn't get along with the owner so much for certain things, but he clearly has respect for Douglas and Saleh, it seems. And, maybe he enjoys winning some games with an offense that's actually like built around him. I could see it happening for 2 years. And again, I'm more at like 50-50. Kyle seems to be less encouraged. It's going to be 2 years, but I don't think it's a lock for 2 years. I'm hopeful it's for 2 years, but I just can't guarantee it with a guy as volatile as him. And again, I don't think he meant, like you said before, Kyle, I don't think he really meant the 90-10 thing. It seems like that was like, it was kind of there with the retirement, but 90% retirement, it didn't really seem like that. But the saying, like, okay, if you're thinking about retirement, it's time to retire. Did he really mean that? Did he not? So it's just sketchy with the fact that he's 40 years old too. He's going to be 40 years old. Does he have a bad season? Say, screw this, So there's a lot of factors to that. But
if he has a bad season, I don't know how many Jets fans want him back. So.
Yeah. And like, what is a bad season? Like what is the worst case scenario? Like, I don't want to think about it. Don't even bring it up. We're not going there. Because we've always had the worst case scenario.
I can't see him having a bad season. Well, we would consider to be a bad season in terms of quarterback play.
He's going to be good. He's going to be very good.
Okay. I was almost going to get into it, but I'm not going to.
Don't do it. I don't want to talk about it. Don't even put that out into the ether. But I can't guarantee that it's going to be another year. But anything else to add to that? Because I appreciate the $20.
No. Thank you, Rob. Really appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Beloved_peace for $5 says, would you guys draft Jackson Smith-Njigba at 13 if OBJ doesn't sign, or would you draft a receiver early regardless of OBJ signing? Probably, I guess, came in a little bit after we addressed this point, but I'm absolutely all for addressing him if, like, he is definitely like the player on your board who you feel is the best player there. I have no problem drafting him. And I think that kind of, we got players who can move in and out of the slot. When you talk about Lazard, when you talk about OBJ, when you talk about Garrett Wilson, Garrett Wilson, we kind of viewed him kind of like as a guy who would play a lot in the slot when we drafted him. But I like having guys that you can move in and out. And I think that this is a really good player. We've seen 2 really solid years, at least that we evaluated from Ohio State. So, while we haven't really studied him, like really concentrating on him, when you watch Garrett Wilson or you watch Justin Fields tape, the kid just pops off. He's that good.
Yeah.
So I feel very confident saying he's going to be a good player in the NFL. So I would definitely take him. If I feel like, hey, listen, maybe tackle is a bigger need, but the bust factor of this tackle that I might draft is way higher than JSN. I'm taking JSN. That's just the way I think.
Yeah, and in a vacuum, and I have to evaluate all of them, but I didn't love Skoronski. I didn't love Johnson. I don't love Jones. So in a vacuum, I might take him over all of those guys. But again, what's the situation? If we have Odell, you're not drafting Jackson Smith. If obviously, like, let's say like Skoronski's there and they like him, so it's all dependent on the situation. But and do you draft a receiver early, regardless of OBJ signing? No. Obviously, in a perfect world, no. But we don't know how the draft unfolds. Like if they like a receiver in the second round a lot more than they like the D tackle or the center, okay, then draft a receiver. It is what it is. You don't want to necessarily reach, but it's if they sign OBJ, it's farther down the priority list, right? Because you're going to have 4 deep. You're most likely going to have Cobb, and then Mims is going to be your 6. So do you really need another receiver more than obviously you need a backup D tackle, considering how much that backup's going to play along with Solomon Thomas, how much, a safety, linebacker, whatever it's going to be. So if they get a guy, I don't see it being early need regardless. So, but appreciate the super chat. Yeah, appreciate it. So we'll move on to the chat for the next half an hour ish. We're going to strictly chat. I'm sorry. A top 5 quarterback review from Joe. What a change of scenery from the norm, from the worst quarterback play in the last 20 years.
I'm curious.
Aaron Rodgers.
Curious, Joe. So I was talking with our buddy Scott, and he was saying that I'm forgetting the guy's name at the moment, but he used to be a scout for the New York Giants, who Mark Ross, I believe, who helped really evaluate JPP and really encourage them drafting him that year. And he was saying something like, if Rodgers does indeed go to the Jets, he would be the 8th best quarterback in the AFC. Do you agree with that, Joe? Because at least for this year, based on the tape that I saw last year, there's no way I'm taking 7 other quarterbacks in the AFC before I'm taking Aaron Rodgers.
No, I think we kind of laid it out. We said that Burrow, Mahomes, okay, fine.
Herbert, even fine. Age
Herbert,
and stuff.
Even if you want to give Herbert and Allen, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Rodgers is 5. Okay, maybe you want to argue Lawrence over him because of Lawrence end of the year. Okay,
sure.
6 is the absolute lowest, but there's been games where he's going to be better than Allen. Like Allen didn't have a great year great day every day last year. Like he was MVP type Josh Allen in 2021, 2022. He was very, very, very good. He was an elite Josh Allen.
There was a lot more dumb decisions last year, like that interception that he had early in the MetLife Stadium game against the Jets last year, where he threw the pick in the flat to Whitehead. That was bad.
The pick to sauce later in the game was terrible too.
Yeah. So I think losing Dayball did a number on Allen, but I guess for 1 year I would still take Allen because all the other stuff that Allen gives you.
Yeah.
But am I taking Watson? Watson didn't look great in his 5-6 starts for Cleveland last year, and there's no way I'm taking Lamar before I'm
taking him 5. If you gave me, okay, this is your hat of quarterbacks for just this year, you want to win a Super Bowl, he's my 5th quarterback I'm taking in the NFL right now.
Okay.
Just for this year. Now, obviously, I'd rather have Lawrence on the team because he's going to be here for the next 15 years, but that's a different story.
We had to win those games.
We had to win those games.
Captain builds character.
Ireland. I'm sorry, I forgot it was Ireland, but I know we have like Tokyo, Australia, freaking bunch of places. So I'll remember from Ireland though, which I've been to Ireland actually a couple of years ago. You all see the picture of Beckham with Arnold and Francis Ngannou. Yeah,
yes.
Dude, how small does Arnold Schwarzenegger look? It's crazy. It's crazy. So, what are your guys' thoughts on Michael Carter? I'm slightly concerned from Braden. Kyle, what are your thoughts on Michael Carter, like the whole fiasco? And he apologized for it. He came out and basically said, hey, it's not that serious. What?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I thought he was talking about as a player at first, but he's talking about blocking people on Twitter or something.
I think he's just, I guess I'll take it as in general. What are your thoughts on him going into this year? And what are your thoughts about him blocking people and the whole Zeke thing and, whatever?
And Breece Hall chimed in on that too.
Breece Hall started it.
Yeah. Breece Hall started it. Which I don't know, man. Like, is that a problem for players to go publicly and say, hey, listen, we're confident in what we already have in our running back room? Is that such a huge problem? I don't really care too much about that. The blocking people is weird, but then again, like, there's apps and stuff that you could use to like mass block people, or you could block people that are using like certain phrases and stuff. So, was he going through and manually like reading people's tweets and blocking people, or did he just do like a mass thing because he wants to clean up his timeline or something? I don't know, man. Like, I don't want to read too much into that.
It was just the timing of you had, Moore who got traded. He puts like, leave me alone on Twitter and all
I didn't see
stuff.
that.
And then
I didn't see
he put like leave me alone and then whatever. He apologized for it a couple days.
Well, that was
later.
his best friend on the team, right? Was it not his best friend on the team? Does he have a right to be upset about that? I mean, I don't know. Like,
I'm not gonna look into it too much, but I could say, like, listen, at the end of the day, he needs to prove himself to be a better player in year 3, because year 2 he was not very good. I'm not even like so confident with him as a backup right now. He has a lot to prove to me this year coming up. But I like Michael Carter still, and I think it's a little bit immature to block people and do all that stuff on Twitter. And like, I love his profile picture is always just like straight black before the whole Elijah Moore things happened. But
I think it's been that way for a little while.
Okay, so it has been like that.
Well, at least on I don't know. I don't follow him on Twitter, but I do on Instagram. So I think it's been that way on Instagram.
Nonetheless, not the biggest deal in the world, but just let's play better in year 3.
I will say this, like in terms of like the social media crap, like I hate to break it to some of the old school people out there, but that's just the way it is now. Like lots of players are doing this. This is not unique. One guy, just because one young player is doing this doesn't mean he's a cancer. Lots of players did this. AJ Brown had a great season, almost won a Super Bowl for the Eagles. He was liking tons of tweets and shit and wanting his way out of Tennessee last year. Is AJ Brown a bad guy or anything like that? No, he's not. Deebo Samuel, right? We were talking this time last year. We were talking about potentially trading the 10th overall pick for Deebo Samuel. Did he have the same year that he had 2 years ago? No, but he still had a good year. He's still a great player. There was pictures of him in the club going like this, saying like that he's done in San Fran, but yet he's back in San Fran. I mean, like, sorry to say it, but just in this day and age, you're going to see a lot more of that crap. Doesn't mean that the guy's a bad guy or doesn't mean that he shouldn't be on your team.
Boomtown. Well, we're gonna fly through these, Kyle. We have to fly a little bit because we're like an hour behind. Boomtown 49ers. Not sure if this is a hot take, but I like bringing in Fournette to let Brees slowly come up to speed if he starts on PUP list. Again, in an ideal world, would you do that? Sure, if the salary cap was fake. But that's need like 7 or 8, especially with signing Ty Johnson. We talked about like drafting a running back or whatever, Kyle, a couple of weeks ago. But now that they signed Ty Johnson, it's not a need really at all. So I wouldn't do it depending on the price. If they're coming for $1 million, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I don't think he's signing for pennies. This guy was the 4th overall pick. I don't think he's signing for pennies. People talk about Becton, Kyle, which I acknowledged last week. Like he's turned himself around on Twitter. In terms of like, in my view, I didn't like the big bust stuff and like always quote tweeting people, but the fact he's being like positive and the workout stuff and all that, he's definitely easier to root for, I would say, this year than in years prior. So it is nice to see Becton. He's probably in a better mental space now. Like, I mean, like when he's getting surgery and stuff, like he couldn't work out for weeks, how long? I'm sorry. I'm going to talk long. Let's move on. Boom. You're trying nicely to move me through.
Self-awareness. No, that's okay. It just, again, I have next week, Kyle. I think it's the next time we live stream together, I don't have to get off necessarily at 8:00. I don't have to work that night. It's finally hit that spot in my rotation for a couple of weeks. I don't have to get off immediately at 8:00. Clark or Whitehead, who's better? Whitehead. Whitehead is better. Sorry. Clark is better. I don't know why I just said that. Clark is much better. Watching Whitehead versus Clark, I do not understand how I get, okay, I guess he's a little bit younger, Whitehead. But the fact that Whitehead got $7, $8, $9 million a year and Clark is getting $4 million, I don't understand it. Clark
must have been age and the fact that he won a Super Bowl.
But Clark is like 28 or 29. It's not like he's that old. So Clark is a much better player than Whitehead, in my opinion.
Well, the Ravens are also a smart team too, so they locked the guy in while they could lock him in, for a reasonable deal.
Dude,
smart teams do things like that.
Clark is just so solid. Like he's not really bad at anything. He's not great at anything, but like I watched only one of his games, and it's sometimes a safety. There could be a game where you don't really see him do too much, but if I got a safety who's not blowing any coverages, he always seems to be in the right spots. Seems like he's communicating well. He doesn't miss any tackles. The only time he misses
tackles, what I saw on the one game I watched.
The only time he misses tackles is if it's a lack of athleticism, or sometimes he goes a little bit high on guys, but past that, dude, he almost plays linebacker at least like halfway through the season of the Ravens. Like it's linebacker pretty much roles, or strong safety. He plays
the game that I saw. They had Kyle Hamilton playing slot corner the entire game, and Clark was pretty much playing in a too high safety shell. He was playing back the whole time.
Yeah, I'm curious what game you watched. A lot of the ones I watched.
That would be the Steelers game last year where Kenny Pickett got a concussion. That game, like week 14, something like that.
Yeah, so maybe I haven't watched it yet. So I'm like up to like week 9, but solid in the box, pretty good at man coverage. He's just very, very consistent and solid and not great at anything. He's just, I like him. I like Clark a lot, and we'll get into the film after we do that review as well. But who's better? It's easily Clark to me. Joe, what's up? To Matthias. I always say I'm going to say it one way, and I always forget which way.
I think it's Matthias.
Why is no one talking about how likely this is to backfire? Selling out for 1 or 2 years is not a better strategy than building steadily to be a consistent contender. Like, but
the Jets tried to do it that way.
We've been trying to do that. He tried to do that with Zach Wilson, and it failed. So he gets another shot. Now, obviously, everybody in here would rather say, okay, we'd rather have Zach Wilson work out and be a top 10 quarterback or guy who can lead us to the promised land. But unfortunately, that plan failed. So people are acknowledging it could backfire. He can come here for a year, not win and then leave, and then we're hit with all the dead money and all that stuff.
Imagine this.
It's not a perfect situation.
If you're Joe Douglas, imagine you drafted a quarterback this year. You either traded up to get one, or you sat at 13 and maybe drafted one if there was one there. And that guy turned out to be pretty fucking bad. Like, what is the chances that Woody Johnson, who's an impatient guy, says, you know what, Joe Douglas, the wins just aren't there, man. You've been here for 4 years now. Goodbye. Versus if Joe Douglas gets Aaron Rodgers, has him for 2 years, makes some legit noise in the playoffs, what's the likelihood of him getting a contract extension then?
Mm-hmm.
I think, you have to look at it from Douglas's perspective too, and Saleh for that matter.
I would rather
and obviously we know Woody Johnson wants Aaron Rodgers, so
he would rather sign the good players we drafted, which they will. Getting Aaron Rodgers is not going to prohibit them from signing Garrett Wilson or Sauce or any one of these guys, maybe like a Michael Carter or something like that. Okay. And see if we can find the next Brissett, Geno Smith, Brock Purdy. So we rather have Geno Smith, Brock Purdy, Brissett over Aaron Rodgers for a year or two. I don't.
Yeah. Dude, put Brock Purdy on put Brock Purdy on so many other teams last year, and how good does he do?
Not very well. But I get it not being an ideal situation. Yes, it can blow up, and that's what a lot of people talk about with getting Rodgers. But assuming the best, we can win the Super Bowl. I don't want to pivot from maybe a Super Bowl chance or at least a deep playoff run chance to Jacoby Brissett and going 8-9, 9-8, and then trying to find another quarterback in the draft. They're past that point. Now, again, in an ideal world, do they trade up to number 2 and land, Bryce Young, and then he's a superstar? Sure, that'd be fucking awesome. But we kind of already tried that a lot of times in the last couple of years, and it hasn't worked. So we're here. We have to take a risk with Rodgers. So,
by the way, it does make you wonder, like when you think of like Baker Mayfield, when you think of how Russell's kind of declined in recent years. There's another Kyler Murray. It makes you wonder if like the whole small quarterback thing, like it almost seems like that was kind of like a race, like, oh, size doesn't really matter anymore. But I don't know, maybe it does. And it seems like some people are legit concerned with Bryce Young for that reason. But supposedly his tape is the best. I don't know. I haven't watched him.
So Nick Nova says Lazard and Wilson both getting 1,000 receiving yards.
I would not bet on Lazard.
I'm taking the strong over on Wilson. I'm taking the strong under on Lazard. Yes. I see Lazard as 600-700 yards, maybe 7-8 touchdowns, like consistent in the red zone, something like that. And then the one under, it's Hardman getting at least 800. I'm also going way under. Hardman's going to get.
Hardman could have like 200-300 rushing yards, maybe.
I think he can get 800 all-purpose yards, maybe, not including punt returns. But receiving and rushing, okay, I could buy that's possible. But receiving straight up, I think absolutely not. They did
run him at Wildcat as a quarterback sometimes, Hardman. So wouldn't be surprised if you saw some of that here.
Hello, boys. Hello to Jets mess. Appreciate you joining in. Why would someone make a chicken salad with shit? I don't think that's how the terminology goes. What is it?
I maybe I fucked up the saying, but I said sometimes when you have maybe I did fuck it up. You try to turn. I don't know. Maybe I fucked it up. But my point was that Aaron Rodgers wasn't working with a lot last year.
What is it? You can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit? Is that the terminology? I don't know if I've ever said that terminology.
Something like that.
Or that phrase.
Maybe I'm getting it wrong. Maybe I seem like an idiot now.
You might have. Let's see. I'm just trying to fly through all the chat stuff. Kings have. Oh yeah, I saw that, Dakota. Kings ended their 17-year playoff drought. Now the Jets are in first for all the professional four franchises or leagues. They're the team who has not had any playoffs.
Prior to Sean McDermott, the Bills had a 17-ish year. 17. I think it was 17-year playoff drought. So I'm really hoping that we don't.
If we get Aaron Rodgers and we don't go to the playoffs next year, Kyle, something is very, very bad. I wonder if I could just drop into the past. Obviously, there's some other places I want to go before this day, Kyle. But if I just drop back to the Patriots game or walking out of that game, I was like, hey, Aaron Rodgers next year. Like, what? Okay, let's go. That would have
cheered you up a lot. You were, dude. I honestly walking. I was just like, I'm just gonna give him his space.
You just know when it's done. It was just done. He's just done. It's just that was it for me. That was the last straw with Zach Wilson was that Patriots game.
And the sad thing is that wasn't even his worst game against the Patriots last year.
No, it wasn't, because he had a good first quarter and a half that game. Like, we were like, damn, he's making some good throws. And
even at the end of the game, like when their like last touchdown drive, like he had it, and even there was like another one where they marched down and got in the red zone, but didn't punch it in. But he still had like a couple like nice throws on that drive. But that game in New England, man, oh my God.
Yeah, that was brutal. But as soon as he threw that pick where he overthrew Ty Johnson, we're like, this is not gonna end well. Didn't. Rivka says, appreciate you being in here, Rivka. I would be totally fine if you retired a champion. Just want 2 bites of the apple because any given team doesn't necessarily have an amazing chance. No team has an amazing chance, really. Like what is amazing? Because even the Pats, what they won 6 Super Bowls with Brady, right? 6 over
6 Super Bowls with Brady, yeah.
Over 20 years. So like, let's say their percentage chance was 33%.
They were in the AFC. They went to the AFC Championship game probably like 12 times with Brady or something like that,
if not more. Yeah, but but still. Okay, so keep moving on. So pissed we missed out on Campbell. Yeah, I'm not happy he didn't at least meet with us too. I really, really wanted Campbell, really, really bad. I even wanted him. I would want him over Cox. Like you told me, hey, Campbell for 10 or Cox for 10. I want Campbell over Cox at this point. I still think he's a very good player. But let's keep moving on to the chat. I'm at about 7:16, so I'm catching up. Why not try to do a package deal, Rodgers and Bakhtiari?
Well, Bakhtiari is a big contract too, so that's the issue.
His contract is massive. He played 1 game 2 years ago. He played 11 games last year. And Kyle, I don't know if you noticed. I don't know if you watched. Again, you watched Aaron Rodgers this past year, but Bakhtiari was not something I want to trade for this last year. He was not what I remember him being.
I wasn't even really considering it, so I wasn't really trying to watch him.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was.
I can say this though: there's been a lot of Randall Cobb to the Jets stuff. Randall Cobb's not a bad player, and you can really tell that their offense was better when he was on the field last year.
I've been saying that, like people talk about like Cobb, like he's wide receiver 2 or 3. He's going to be Cobb for wide receiver 5. He's replacing Jeff Smith and Denzel Mims. He is better than both. Like, if you're telling me right now, Cobb versus Denzel Mims versus Jeff Smith, get open on question mark route, whatever it is, I'm taking Cobb over both of those guys.
Yeah.
So he's not a bad wide receiver 5.
There is a question of health because it did seem like he missed a decent amount of time, and obviously he got hurt in that Jets game last year. But now
he's gonna play 10 snaps a game, maybe.
He's not a bad player.
Yeah, no, I agree. But Bakhtiari, like that's the thing, like too. Like people talk about Hardman, like he sucks. He's not a Elijah Moore replacement. He's wide receiver 4. You know, Mercedes Lewis is a Kenny Yeboah replacement, not a Jeremy Ruckert replacement. You know, so like who cares? And Mercedes Lewis, I don't know if you noticed it too. He's actually a pretty good blocker, and when he gets
he's
the ball,
a very good blocker.
He's a good blocker, and his yak isn't bad too. Like, I wouldn't hate him as a tight end 4 either. Like these guys aren't bad players who are unrosterable. They're still maybe their player 50 out of 53, you know, but still people are acting like these guys are trash. They're really not. I'm not just trying to say that. Connor McGovern mid, it's fine, dude. I think if you could sign up for mid, like if you miss out on Ben Jones and it's McGovern or drafting on the 2nd or 3rd round, I think mid is pretty much the best you're going to do. Like obviously that rookie can hit and be a stud, but what is the chances of a 2nd round center being even an average player throughout history of the NFL draft, Kyle? 10%? Like realistically? So
I don't know.
Numbers aren't, 2nd round picks aren't locks like everybody thinks they are. So Cheddarhead, when will the Jets just give up both those 2nd rounders so we can move on? It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen.
Both those 2nd rounders not happening. You might get the 2nd next year though.
You're going to get 43, not 42, and you're not getting a swap first. It's not happening. You're going to get a 2 and a 2 maybe in your 2025 2, or a 2 and like a conditional 3rd or 4th in Corey Davis, but it's not going to be much past that. So 100%. Why is the Jets holding up the trade? I think the Packers have been known to be holding up the trade as of right now. It seems like there's some like leakings of, not like leakings, but some insinuations of the Packers might have changed their trade or the deal they accepted like late into the process. So I don't know. It could be compensation right now. It could be contract. It could be players coming along. It could be a lot of things.
If it's contract and if it's just a matter of the Jets having to spend more money out of Woody Johnson's pocketbook, so to speak, Woody Johnson needs to, go ahead and put his money where his mouth is. That should be no reason to hold it up. You want to make a splash, you're impatient and stuff. You were over in England for a couple of years. You want to show this Jets fan base you're serious about winning. That should not be an issue.
Mm-hmm. G Father says, why are we questioning Odell versus Davis? I don't know. If Odell hasn't played a decade, I'll still take him over Corey Davis. Come on now. Corey Davis is a decent starting level receiver. Odell Beckham hasn't played a game in a year and a half at this point. So in 2022, are you taking Odell or Corey Davis? Because Corey Davis played, Odell didn't. Like he's an okay starter.
And by the way, Odell was not good at all with the Browns for multiple years with the Browns. Yeah, and you could argue that some of that was on Baker Mayfield and stuff, and I'm totally agree with that. But I mean,
he blew out 2 ACLs. Like that's why. Now in a vacuum, Odell versus Corey Davis. Okay, give me Odell, but Odell at what out of 13, 14, $15 million, give me Davis. It's not, we're not talking about Odell Beckham who made that catch against the Cowboys. You know, it's Odell after 2 ACLs and being 30, 31 years old. So NJZ, $5 super chat, appreciate it. Most Super Bowl winning quarterbacks were not taken in the top 5. Why can't we find one without a top 5 pick like everyone else? Thanks for the great content.
Yeah, but okay, but there's a lot more draft picks that aren't in the top 5. So just by sheer percentage and stuff, you know, okay, Mahomes was a 2-time winning Super Bowl quarterback. He was drafted 10th overall, so he was very early draft pick.
Mm-hmm. Peyton
easier
was an
said than
early
done.
pick. Russell,
yeah,
I guess,
Peyton Manning, 2-time Super Bowl winner. Eli Manning, they were both first overall picks. That's 4 Super Bowls between the two of them. They were first overall picks. John Elway, right? We can't
even come. NJZ, I know you're a Jets fan. We can't even find a quarterback with a top 5 pick. Why are we trying to find one without one now? Like, we know how hard it is just in that top 2 or 3.
Stafford first overall pick. I know.
I get it. Like, you can find a guy in the 4th round, but it's like, you know what? Fuck it. We're so confident 5, 6 quarterbacks will go. We'll still find our guy in the 2nd round. Like, ideally, you get the first quarterback. And we've had the 1st, 2nd, 3rd one quite often in the last couple of years, and it hasn't worked out. So the Jets are not going to – Joe Douglas is not going to bank his future on, hey, this quarterback in the 2nd round, Hernan Hooker, whatever his name is, could work out in the 2nd round. We're not getting Rodgers. And then it doesn't work out. He gets injured, and then, he gets fired the next year. So it could happen, but we can't even find one with the number 1 pick if we wanted to the last couple of years. So, yeah. Like everyone else, I don't know. Yeah, Packers fans in here still saying both 2nd rounders. I can guarantee it's not going to happen. 42 and 43. So, keep moving on. Jets fans calling Wilson a bust already. God damn, Again, this is them. This is coming from Packers fans who have watched great quarterback play for the last 2 years.
Cheddarhead, if you watched 20 years, you would not be disagreeing right now.
There's a reason that they're getting Rodgers right now and not playing Wilson. You can call a guy a bust after 2 years if he's that bad. Like, was Josh Rosen a bust after 2 years? Yeah. Now, again, is there a very small percentage chance he can turn around? Sure, but I'm not betting on it. Like, it's like 1 or 2%. But is he locked down a bust? Not necessarily. But he's had one of the worst starts you've ever seen in NFL history.
I was me more than anyone else I can think of was so in favor of moving on from Sam Darnold. Even with that being said, when we traded him, I did think that there was a chance, not a great chance, but I thought that there was a chance that he could turn his career around in Carolina and elsewhere. And even now that he's with the 49ers, could that do wonders for his career? Maybe. I was much more optimistic about him turning his career around than Zach Wilson, even though he was not on our team. So I had a bias against him. Zach Wilson's still on the team, and I have no faith that he's going to turn it around.
No, it's not just bad. Like, we've seen bad. We've seen, Darnold and Geno and all these guys, whatever. It's the worst we've ever seen. It's worse than Sanchez. It's worse than anything we've seen, and we've seen bad quarterback play, so we know it.
Worse than Geno.
And
he had more around him. Despite being immensely talented, it's just, and it's funny. Like, when you watch Rodgers, he can throw with such, like, I don't want to say bad feet, but like just not like a proper platform. And he could just make these ridiculous throws all the time. And it's like
every once in a while.
It does. But it's funny, like, how Zach tries to replicate that so often. It just doesn't work.
No, it does not work. So yeah, and it's historically bad. Like, the numbers too. It's up there with the Ryan Leafs, the Jamarcus Russells, and nobody's ever really turned around from how low he is right now. So yeah, I would bet a lot of money he's a bust right now, Kyle. I would pretty penny. So Shadow Maniac says hello, Joe. Hello, Kyle. Hello, Jets fans, and hello, Packers fans in the chat. He's being very cordial here. And Cheddar, I don't have a problem with Cheddarhead. He's in a fight with some people in here, but it is what it is. As long as they're not being like crazy, like, oh, we're gonna get sauce, this and that. 2 seconds, I don't think it's outlandish or somebody think that. Let's see. I don't know if this is in relation to Kyle. I don't know if you do. Head and shoulders my ass. Mike White 3 TDs in 4 games. 3 games 0 TDs. Zach was bad, but the QB room is a whole blue.
It must have been when I was saying that whoever came in and played was better than Zach Wilson last year, whether it was Flacco, whether it was Mike White. Listen, I'm not going to argue with you about whatever Strevler or whatever, but you can't tell me that Flacco wasn't significantly better than what we saw from Wilson. I'm not saying Flacco was good. He wasn't.
The Bengals game was very, 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 very bad for Flacco. And so was the game where he came in, Miami or Buffalo when he came in for a few reps. Miami was pretty bad. So, like, there was games where Zach Wilson what was his best game of last year, Kyle? Zach Wilson.
Okay, so you were pretty happy with his performance at MetLife Stadium against Miami last year. But dude, honestly, in that game, it was like, okay, he
That
had
was his best game.
Breece Hall. Breece Hall was a broken play on a wheel route that
Took
Breece
it like
Hall
60 yards,
took,
which is like a third of his yards that game.
50 yards after the catch or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, Zach had a rushing touchdown on the goal line because everything was covered. Like all his passes that he's completed outside of that Breece Hall one was like, hitting guys on swing routes and like, hitting a receiver in the flat who just is turning up for some yak. I mean, like there wasn't really many good throws in that game. Sorry, there wasn't. Did he have another good game? What was the other good game? The Steelers game, maybe? Right? Like he had the fourth quarter comeback, right? Like, he almost had another interception to Minkah Fitzpatrick, right? Like if he gets the other foot in.
I would say probably, honestly, like thinking back on it now, from overall, like I would say Bills probably 1, Dolphins 2, Steelers just because of the comeback 3. But other than that, everything else was really, really bad. And even those games were okay at best. But
his Bills game was his best game. That Bills game. There was a couple plays where they had really good pressure on him, and he was able to make some nice throws from like just a bad spot, but like he had a nice zip on the ball and stuff. That was probably his best game overall, but it wasn't good though.
No, from Dino,
and obviously the Jets defense won them that game.
Mm-hmm. When are we going to get Q signed to a new deal? We need to lock him in. I'm going to say June, right before like OTAs and all the required stuff there, or where the Jets are required to come in. I'm going to say like June.
That. After they sign a lot of the rookies and stuff, and I can see that. Yeah.
Okay, let's keep running through. None of your fault. I'll take my 13 years and win 30 years of joy. Yeah, I'm not. I like Packers fans, but some of the Packers fans who are really, really cocky on Twitter, I'm starting to be like, do I kind of want them to win like 5 games next year and just kind of get a feeling of what being bad tastes like, So I don't know, but there was no other fans that compared to Green Bay fans that I've encountered so far. So just because Peter Kukowski is out there, I don't hate the Packers.
Yeah. Speaking of him, I saw that like it was like 2 tweets within like an hour apart of each other. And one, he was saying like there was no way Elijah Moore was ever going to come to the Packers just for the simple fact that he publicly bashed Matt LaFleur's brother, Mike. And then like, I guess was in an hour previously, he was like
an hour previous.
He was saying that, this means that Elijah Moore's definitely coming to the Packers. It's like
he's an idiot.
He just like throws anything.
One day it's a first round pick, and now it's like 2 seconds, like all this stuff must be players. He's backpedaled from 13 and a player to now a second and whatever. But yeah, I've seen a no way Elijah Elijah Moore coming to the Packers to absolutely no way, it was never going to happen. Literally an hour later, before even deleting the next tweet, it's like, what are we doing? Charles says, why aren't we signing a free safety? I don't know. Now this is a position that I see like. You have the McLeods, the Johnsons out there. I think that after the draft, if you were to miss out on the safety, you could sign a guy from like the veteran scrap heap who will be good enough to start and better than Joyner last year. But like maybe they go into the draft and they're okay. They like a guy or 2 in the 4th round. If they land him, great. Maybe he starts with and then competes with Tony Adams. If not, you bring in a vet. To me, based on the fact you can get a seemingly solid starter in McLeod right now for $3-4 million, I would just do that and then develop a guy behind him. But in general, I would agree with you. If there are fans out there, Kyle, who think that it's going to be Clark and Whitehead and they're going to be the starting free and strong, if that's the Jets' plan, I have serious questions about their Italian evaluation. I really do. So let's keep moving on because we're about at 8 o'clock. Nazaline was a former safety from Florida State, was converted to linebacker. No, do not change him back. Don't do that. Don't do that. You're not going training in the NFL for 3 years as a linebacker.
What you really liked
safety.
about Nasruddin is the fact that, there was little shades of, and I'm quoting Joe Blewett here, Jamal Adams in his tape. Like, he was just kind of like a reckless abandon for his body and stuff. You never really were impressed by what he did from a coverage standpoint as a deep safety. So there's no way they're moving him back at this point in his career. No.
Devils 2-0 over Rangers, which is nice. Mets won today too, 5-3. Marlins, so it's nice. Cheddar, cool. Honestly, Jets fan. Poona Ford or Shelby Harris, please. Yeah, I'm with that. Poona Ford, Shelby Harris. I've seen a little bit of Wormley people throwing that one out there. But right now, I'm kind of like Shelby Harris. Give me Shelby Harris. I've seen him be pretty good. I know last year's a little bit more down for him, or not as high as years past. But 31 years old, I'm down with it. Poona Ford, obviously, familiarity with the scheme and all that stuff. But let's see. Zach 100% has a chance to be a good QB one day.
I mean, the talent's there, but I just don't know that he could ever.
So
be smart enough.
all this is saying is there's at least a slight minimalistic, even 0%, 0.11% chance, whatever, that he has a chance to be a good quarterback. Yeah, he has 100% has a chance, but that chance can be 0.00001, and he still has a 100% chance of having a chance. That chance is very low, though. So playing word gymnastics right there. Yeah, of course, he has 100% has a chance. What's the actual chance, though? 1%, maybe. So if we can get Cobb on a cheap deal, yeah, he's going to be vet minimum deal. But I'm taking him as wide receiver 5 for Jeff Smith. Taking him as wide receiver 5 for Denzel Mims right now, right? Now, obviously, Mims and the upside and all that stuff, but 1-for-1 right now in a slant route, we're taking Cobb, right?
Yeah.
So Bakhtiari better than any lineman the Jets got. Lamo. Okay, this is just the Packers fan because ABT is better than Bakhtiari right now. that is for sure. Bakhtiari's been hurt too, and he was bad last year when I watched him. So ABT trash. Yeah. Okay. So we have Cheddarhead who's a good one, and John Dorn who's an idiot. So ABT's trash, Kyle, too. So keep moving on. A couple minutes.
Shame he got hurt last year.
It sucks, man. Bakhtiari is a top 5 left tackle when he plays. Keyword when he plays. He's played 12 games in the last 2 years. He played almost a full season 3 years ago. So just if you didn't actually know that, I hope you do. And a top 5 left tackle, no. I watched him last year when he played. I watched every single game. He was not. He got bitched quite often. He got spun around multiple times and let up sacks and pressures. He was not great last year, that's for sure. So if Packers fans are thinking, okay, well, he's going to be great next year when he's healthy, hope he's healthy, I got some bad news for you. He might be okay at this point. Maybe even slightly above average, but when he popped out to me, it was for typically bad reasons. So you were more upset with Zach compared the ST versus the Pats.
What does he mean by ST?
I don't know. You were more upset with Zach compared to the. I don't know.
Sorry.
That has to be worded, but that has to be worded better. I think he's probably going after you, Kyle. I don't think Gangrene Goliath likes you. Who is Peter Kukowski? It's Peter. What's his actual name?
Bookhouse. I think it's Bukowski, but people are calling him Kukowski.
He's going to get destroyed on trade day. I feel bad for. I actually don't feel bad for him. He deserves it, but he's going to get destroyed. It's going to be very fun to see.
He's the definition of a grifter for sure.
Yeah, he's going to make his account private. I'm pretty sure. Are we restructuring Whitehead? They should not. The only thing I can think with the safeties, and I got to run after this pretty much, but with the safeties, the only thing I think about is Clark played so much linebacker from what I've watched. Maybe they're planning on playing him a little bit at linebacker, at like weak side linebacker, having Whitehead as a strong safety and then bringing in a free safety. I could see them wanting to do that and getting, not necessarily more with the times because they have linebackers who can move for the most part last year, but maybe Clark and Whitehead play some linebacker slash strong safety. But in general, right now, I would assume that Whitehead's going to be cut. I past that. Why is he here if Clark is here? So are we restructuring more players? I could see Lawson. I could see Whitehead. Maybe I could see Davis like a little bit. But people are talking about like, oh, we're going to restructure him, get him down like they did Jamison Crowder a couple of years ago. Jamison Crowder got restructured from like 10 to like 4. Corey Davis is not thinking $4 or $5 million. He's maybe 2 or 3, but that's about it. So chance with that chance was very low with Geno too. Right now, look at him. No, it's like Geno was not the level of bust.
Honestly, Geno showed more than Zach Wilson.
A lot more.
Hate to say it. More. Geno Smith, when he was drafted in 2013, who was he throwing to? Who?
Jeremy Curley.
He had
David Nelson.
Who had the game-winning touchdown in that first opening game against the Bucs? It was Kellen Winslow. All right, washed up Kellen.
That was a bailout, by the way. That was a bailout. That win, which I was there for that game.
And Geno was awful. But the thing is see, Geno, a lot of his problems was, he struggled a lot reading defenses early in his career. But Geno could hit a check down.
Geno's
Packers fans that don't know, who haven't watched Zach Wilson's tape, this guy cannot hit a check down.
Like 12 feet over their head, not hit a check down. But his starting offense was Blau Powell, Stephen Hill, Santonio Holmes, Jeremy Curley, Cumberland, and then some offensive linemen had like Winters on it, Cologne, Austin Howard. So yeah, Geno didn't have nearly the team that Zach Wilson did. He had on levels of busts. Zach Wilson was much more of a bust than Geno, so Geno had a better chance. I would not say, and listen, if we're trying to make MJ Dunn, I know you say you appreciate the show and stuff, but if we're trying to compare the Geno Smith situation, or like, what's the word I'm looking for? How often does a Geno Smith situation happen is what I'm saying. When's the last time a guy has been benched for 4 or 5 years, not really played a lot, came out and been a solid starter in the NFL, Kyle? Can you think of any other situation other than Geno Smith that's happened? Or can MJ done? Because
for being benched as long as he was benched for a long time. I think it was way more than 4 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, 5 or 6. We drafted him. He's like 22, 23, played 2-3 years for us. He went to the Giants. He went to the Seahawks, right? He didn't really ever.
He was with the Chargers. He sat behind Philip Rivers for several years.
Yeah, you're right. You are right. Yeah. So, has that ever happened?
I can't think of another example. There might be.
But yes. So Geno was that
the comparison.
Chance, right?
The comparison that some people will make is Alex Smith, former first overall pick. He was god awful for however many years. Once Jimmy Harbaugh came, he kind of turned around his career a lot. Then he obviously goes to Kansas City, has a pretty good career with Andy Reid. Alex Smith became solid, but I don't know. I mean, like Zach Wilson, you're just talking basic quarterbacking 101. It's not there. Like, yes, you do see some impressive throws sometimes, but I mean, in the NFL, they've been very, very few and far between.
So, but bringing up Geno, okay, I get it, but Geno at the time of him getting released or signed to another team was still at like 1% because it's only happened 1% of the time. How many guys have been bust and then never hear from again? So yeah, that's the only, or maybe one of the very few examples ever to happen. So sure, you got me, I guess. But
if you were a betting man, like if you wanted to make a bet with you about that happening, you
let's just throw 1,000, a cool 1,000 on Zach Wilson being not a bust or like any type of starting level player. Is there the next Nick Mangold in this year's draft, and are we going to draft him? I would say I would take the field. I would say no.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a
Nick Mangold was Ohio State. He was, if I'm not mistaken, an All-American first-round pick. Everyone knew he was going to be good, and he was good. So, and did the Jets trade up to get Mangold? Did they trade up to get him? I know it was the same year as Brick. They had the 4th overall pick, but I'm wondering with the later pick, I think they did move up.
Mm-hmm.
I know they moved up to get Revis.
David Bakhtiari. I'm almost tempted to go back and like find some reps where Rodgers had no chance because of Bakhtiari and he just threw the ball away or whatever. But I'm not going to do that because I have almost 200 plays of Rodgers on my computer. So Geno Smith had a fluke lucky season.
Yeah, I almost was tempted to say that, but for the sake of time, I didn't.
It was one.
Dude, look at this. Look at the contract the Seahawks gave him. Tell me that they're absolutely sold on him because all the incentive laden that way that contract is, it doesn't seem like they're 100% sold on him.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, we call up for the chat. It is 8:10, so I'm 10 minutes past. But with that being said, I appreciate everybody. We will be back. Kyle and I will be back in 2 weeks. I'll be back next week. Kyle, any last words?
No, it was fun. Looking forward to seeing your reviews that I assume we'll be putting out real soon. And I'm looking forward to delving into some of these draft prospects soon.
Yeah, I'm waiting a little bit for Rodgers, but like Lazard, Clark, those guys will go up in the next couple of weeks. So I appreciate all you guys, and we will be back soon.
Yeah.
Adios.